sometimes.
Heroes fall in love through fire.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Belle Saved Lyra's Life from her own explosives movie. Before we start, please go support Justero9 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Belle is a male. The bomb in the wrong place will completely change Lyra's life. Prologue. This sucks. It was the whisper of a grumpy hobbit washing and drying some dishes. She repeated that action over and over again, causing her a lot of stress and making her feel like the day was an eternity. Slowly, I looked up at the clock and my expression turned to frustration when I saw that it was only 9 in the morning. Barely an hour had passed, but she felt like she'd been there for more than 6 hours. But seconds later his eyes lit up when he saw that he only had one plate left, one blessed plate, and all that would be over. But that happiness was massacred the moment another stack of dishes was put in the wash, followed by another, now having 2 twin stacks of dishes. Angrily, I turned to look to one side of her and saw a smiling albino who had left all those plates there. "I hate you," whispered the hobbit. "Be grateful that Sarah saved your life." "I'm Lyra, you imbecile." "Of the same kind." TSK. 1 week ago. 4 girls were running at great speeds across the rooftops of the city of Arario. A few meters ahead of them, a man was running with a frustrated expression as he saw that they kept following him, no matter how many times he crossed. Those girls were truly persistent. Those 4 girls who followed him were members of the Justice family, although for some that title seemed very dubious. Those girls were Knees, Allies, Kagaya and Lyra. That was the Alpha team, a great wonderful dynamite-like wolf squad. The worst formation of the Astri family. Why the worst team? She was a grumpy Asian meat cutter. The narcissist who was more concerned with showing off than thinking of another plan. The Muslim woman who was far more dangerous than the criminal. And Knees, a beautiful werewolf. Boom. TSK. Lyra clicked her tongue as she launched 4 bombs, but none hit their target, exploding in midair. "Lyra, stop throwing your bombs like that. You'll hurt civilians." Allies shouted, continuing to chase the criminal. "Nah. It's okay." I shouted, throwing another bomb which again failed and exploded. "That damned guy is fast." Kagaya angrily gripped her katana, unable to catch him and wanting to chop him into mincemeat. "Obviously. He's one of the few remaining high-ranking officers of Evilis." Knees shouted, also starting to get frustrated. "It wouldn't be that easy. Don't despair, girls. We'll catch up soon." Allies tried to reassure them, even though she was getting frustrated too. After all, they had been following him for about half an hour and all the guy did was run and run. And they couldn't even find an ally who could intercept him. They were on their own. I'm fed up." Lyra yelled, making her friends turn to look at her. Lyra pulled 3 red bombs from her pocket. The colors represented the magnitude of his bombs. He painted them to differentiate them. The blue bombs were grade D, harmless bombs that only served to stun the enemy. The green bombs were class C, bombs that could cause serious burns to people. The red bombs that Lyra had in her hands were grade B, bombs capable of destroying part of a house, very dangerous. The white bombs were grade A, bombs that completely destroyed a house and those around it. And the black bombs, those bombs were grade Y, and "we're screwed" was a joke. I only had one. "Lyra. Don't throw those bombs in the street." Allies shouted upon seeing the red bombs. "You'll hurt civilians." "Relax, I won't hit anyone." Lyra prepared to throw them. "They'll only hit that idiot." "But one is enough." Knees shouted when he saw the 3 bombs. "I know, but the other 2 are to make sure I hit him. We have to secure the victory. Whatever happens, I have nothing to do with it." Kagaya shouted, knowing what was coming and not wanting to be in any more stressful trouble. "Let's see if this is your size," whispered Lyra. And drawing his arms back, he threw the 3 bombs with all his might towards the enemy. The girls hoped that no bomb would be diverted and that they would simply follow their course. Unfortunately, 2 of them collided and sent one flying in another direction, causing all 3 to slap their faces. But the other 2 managed to reach their target, who opened his eyes in horror upon seeing the sinister smile of that hobbit. Shit. Boom. A huge explosion shook that side of the street a little, causing the surrounding civilians to look on in surprise, knowing that the city's terrorist was up to her old tricks again. The evilest guy flew out and fell hard to the ground, expelling smoke from his body with multiple burns. It was a miracle that his body hadn't been blown to pieces. "Ah! I got him!" Lyra exclaimed, heading towards the criminal, as did her 3 companions who were looking at their friend, small but very dangerous. There was the evilest high command on the ground with severe burns on his body watching as those 4 girls approached, mainly that hobbit. "You crazy bitch, they say we're the psychopaths," the guy whispered in pain, watching Lyra walk towards him, smiling. None of this would have happened if you had surrendered willingly, said the hobbit, crossing her arms. It's what you deserve for taking the lives of so many innocent people. Bitch. And with those words the guy fell unconscious, taking another high-ranking evilous officer out of the game. Finally Kagaya sighed, sheathing her katana. I was starting to get stressed. I don't know how much time has passed since we started following him, I'd say almost an hour. Knees moved his arms and legs to try to relax them after running for so long. Of the few remaining high-ranking members of the Apate family, prison will be a good place for you, Allies said, putting anti-state handcuffs on him just in case. Evilus is practically gone. The chase was worth it. Their leader, Valletta, is dead. It was obvious they would all go their separate ways, making them easier to catch. It's only a matter of time before they fold completely, Kagaya said, trying to tidy her hair. I think there are fewer than 10 left, and that plague will disappear. You're right. By the way, Lyra. Allies turned to look at the hobbit who was checking the backpack she was carrying to see how many bombs she had left. What? Don't ever do that again. The Redhead ordered. Those kinds of attacks can endanger civilians. It's very dangerous. But I hit him. If it weren't for me, we'd still be chasing him, he said simply. At this rate, we were going to reach Daedalus and lose him, but I hit him with my bombs. I know, but… Hey Lyra, Knees interrupted her captain, calling out to the hobbit. Now what? That wasn't the only thing you gave to our enemy. The moment she said those words, they all turned around to see what Knees was referring to. Ah. The third bomb that went off course had fallen on a cafe down the street, destroying all the walls of the entrance. That cafe was now in the open air. Fortunately, it seemed that the cafe had no customers since there were no injuries, but there was a lot of material damage. I knew it, Allies whispered, slapping her face. Well, maybe Evilus is gone, but Lyra is still around the city, said Kagaya, shaking her head slightly. As the hobbit smiled nervously at the mess she had unintentionally caused, she had to admit that she had been too reckless. I think I have enough savings to pay for that, he said, scratching his cheek and smiling innocently. Nothing that can be fixed. I think you owe the owners of that place an apology, and we should be grateful that no one was killed or injured, the Redhead said, crossing her arms. And as the perfect captain that I am, I also have to apologize. Things were going so well at work. Sorry girl, she apologized, then looked at the people with a puzzled expression. For some strange reason, the people in the surrounding area were scared and quickly left the place, which confused the girls since the enemy had been defeated. But then they realized that they were not running away from Evilus, or even from each other. They were walking away from that destroyed cafe. That was something that confused them a lot. Let's go. And with those words from the Redhead, the four of them walked toward the destroyed cafe to apologize. Knees was carrying the criminal. They didn't know why, but for some strange reason they had a bad feeling about all of it. As they got closer, they could hear slow footsteps heading towards the exit of that cafe. They were all prepared to apologize except for Kagaya, since according to her, she had nothing to do with it, and that was true. And when that person appeared, Allies prepared to speak so as not to upset him. But seeing that person made all four of them freeze, and more than one of them felt a chill run down her spine. Much more Lyra. About a month ago, news circulated about Aurelio. About a former member of the very powerful Hera family arriving in the city. That was a real problem, so the Astri family wanted to go and talk to that woman and find out what she wanted. But the Loki family wouldn't let them. They said they would take care of it themselves. And it was obvious, they along with the Freya family, kicked that family out of the city, so it wasn't so crazy that that woman returned for revenge. They waited for news for about 2 days until Loki appeared and told them not to worry, that this woman had not come with the intention of harming anyone. And he only asked them one thing. Not to mess with that woman and not to make her angry, because that would be very bad. They received a description of her appearance, and what they remembered most was that this woman had heterochromatic eyes. Just like the woman standing in front of them with an angry expression, looking at part of her coffee shop being destroyed. Then I turned to look with an angry expression at the only 4 women who were there. The girls knew they were going to die when they looked into that woman's eyes. I'll tell you that woman's name, so be careful. Can someone tell me who threw that bomb into my coffee shop? She asked angrily. Althea of silence, don't mess with her, and there won't be any problems in the city. Who was it? Althea asked, taking a step forward. Kagaya, Allies and Knees quickly pointed at Lyra, whose face paled as she saw those eyes fixed on her. Wretched women. Thought the hobbit when she saw that they betrayed her without hesitation. Meanwhile, behind Althea, an albino boy peeked out with a nervous smile, looking at the destroyed walls. And we inaugurated it a week ago, she whispered, touching a piece of wall, and the moment she touched it, it crumbled away. Mom will have to take money out of her bank account to rebuild all this. Then I turned to look at those girls, mainly at that hobbit who clearly seemed nervous. She's dead, he thought. As Alfea walked slowly towards the frightened hobbit. Lyra wasn't one to be easily frightened, no matter how strong the enemy was. She wasn't the bravest person in the world, but she never backed down, no matter how bad things got. But this time she was afraid. The presence of that woman made her feel much smaller than she already was. "So it was you," Alfea whispered, looking directly at the hobbit as the others slowly backed away to avoid her wrath. "Me too." 5. A little while later. The Estrie family headquarters, specifically in the room. A group of people were gathered in that place. Alfea sat on a sofa with an angry expression, and standing behind her was the same albino with a calm expression. Estrie's daughters were standing nearby, and they felt intimidated by the woman's presence. Estrie sat on another sofa with a kind smile, trying to maintain her composure. And on her knees on the ground with a black eye was Lyra, feeling like she was facing her death sentence. Somehow Al Eyes and Knees managed to convince Alfea not to kill Lyra and instead talk to her goddess and see what they could do to fix the whole problem. If it weren't for them, Lyra would already be ground meat. "It's a pleasure to have one of Hera's daughters here at my headquarters," Estrie said with a warm smile. "I didn't come here for a friendly chat with you, Goddess Estrie," Alfea said seriously, making more than one of them flinch. "I only came so you could give me a good reason not to kill that hobbit." Lyra felt another chill run down her spine upon hearing those words. The hobbit never regretted her jokes or her mistakes, but this time she did. She cursed the moment she threw that bomb, and it landed in that woman's cafe. "I am sorry for what my daughter did," Estrie apologized with a nervous smile. "I'm sure she didn't mean to destroy part of your cafe." Learning that Alfea, a powerful level 7 adventurer, was now running a coffee shop surprised more than a few people. And now they weren't surprised that there were no customers at the time the bomb fell, knowing who owned the place. "Lyra didn't have bad intentions with her business," Estrie continued. "It's just that she's a bit idiot," Kagaya said as the hobbit glared at her. "I was going to say special," Estrie whispered with a nervous smile. Alfea's expression grew more irritated as time went on, wanting to strangle that hobbit. While Estrie was thinking of all the solutions to prevent her daughter from dying or worse, to prevent her entire family from being eliminated. Loki said that she was a very dangerous person that they shouldn't provoke, and well, things didn't go well. "If I die, I swear I will bother Lyra in the afterlife for thousands of years," Noin thought, feeling like the air was cutting his throat because of how hostile he felt. "We can pay for the construction of the cafeteria if you want." "I have plenty of money," Alfea said, not sounding arrogant at all. "But what guarantees that that damn terrorist won't throw another bomb?" Well. Seriously? They're supposed to be the family of justice, and they have a crazy woman who attacks like an idiot without thinking about the consequences. Lyra felt like she'd been kicked in the face when she heard those words. They were destroying her without even touching her. And the worst part is that those words were true. "I swear Lyra will learn her lesson and won't do it again, but please, don't hurt her." "Well, that's too bad, but that's what I want, to be at peace. I'm sure we can reach an agreement." While they tried to negotiate the hobbit's fate, the albino behind Alfea just watched everything. Mainly to that hobbit, seeing the slightly downcast expression she had. It was clear she regretted her actions, but for some reason he was sure she wouldn't learn her lesson and would mess up again at some other time. I needed a way for him to learn his lesson. Then a spotlight appeared above the boy's head, a sign that he had an idea. Did a spotlight just appear above her head? Rihanna thought, bewildered by what she had just seen. "Excuse me." The conversation between the two women was interrupted by that albino who spoke for the first time since he arrived. "I have an idea," he said with a slight smile. "By the way, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Belle." All the girls in the room turned their gaze towards him, making him start to feel nervous as he finally realized that he was surrounded by only women. "I imagine you're a cafeteria employee," Estrie said. "Something like that," she laughed, scratching her cheek. "And as I was saying, I have a solution to this problem where no one will get hurt. I would save that hobbit's life. She was still too young to die at the hands of that woman." "Really? I'd like to hear that solution," Estrie asked with a warm smile, hoping that the whole problem would end well. "It's a simple solution that will leave everyone satisfied." "So? What is it?" Alfea asked, looking at Belle. "Well, you don't want compensation money, but you want to make the hobbit pay, and the goddess Estrie wants to resolve this at the same time that your daughter learns her lesson so that she never does it again." "Exactly," Estrie confirmed, curious to know what he would say. "So what's the solution?" Allies asked. "Easy, let the hobbit work for us in the cafeteria." The goddess of justice opened her eyes in surprise upon hearing those words and then smiled seconds later. "That's a good idea." "Of course not." The one who shouted these words was Lyra, who didn't like working in that place at all. This place was where he created bombs, not preparing coffee for a stranger. I think it's a good idea, Belle said, smiling. You can wash the dishes or clean the place, obviously without pay since it's a punishment. Maybe that way you can learn your lesson. I agree, Ally said, smiling too. It's either that or Lyra dies at her hands. No. I'll pay for the construction costs and I won't throw bombs around like crazy again, but I'm not going to work there. I don't think it's a bad idea, to be honest. Lyra turned to look at Alfea the moment she said those words, looking at that woman with a finger on her chin. You could be useful, he said, imagining the hobbit unclogging the toilets that some customer had clogged without paying a penny. That dwarf is more of a hindrance than a help. With you around, the work can be made easier. It would be free labor. But. That seems like a very good idea, Astri repeated. Perhaps that will make Lyra reconsider her actions. Astri Sama whispered Lyra, looking at her goddess with a pleading expression. I'm sorry, but that's what you get for not thinking before you act. Okay then it's decided, we have to rebuild the cafeteria so starting next week you'll be working with us from Monday to Saturday from 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening. The hobbit's face paled upon hearing that. She would be exploited without pay. It would be torture. For how long? Until I deem that you have fulfilled your punishment, he said with a stern look. Ugh. The other girls sighed with relief, knowing that they were now safe and could live another day. Luck had smiled on them this time. Except for that hobbit who sensed that a complete martyrdom was approaching in her life. I can't work that much, I have to patrol. Don't worry. Allies exclaimed, giving a thumbs up. We'll tell RD to cover your place for as many years as necessary, so fix your mistake without worrying about the time. Now I was definitely lost, especially after hearing the word years. She would wash dishes for the rest of her life. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced at that smiling albino and glared at him for what he had done. Don't thank me, I only did the right thing, Belle thought, misunderstanding that death stare. Then that would be all. My daughter will work in your cafe for as long as necessary, Astri said, smiling with relief that everything had gone well. Although I do request that when there's an important mission, she can accompany my other daughters to the dungeon. As long as it's not every week, I agreed, crossing my arms. Great. Thank you for accepting the proposal, and thank you for this peaceful solution, Astri turned to look with a warm smile at the albino who smiled sheepishly. Don't worry, it's all for the sake of helping others. The peaceful solution, yeah right, Lyra thought sarcastically, noticing that Alfea was staring at her, making her nervous again. And to think that starting next week she would be his boss, it will be a real torture. Curse. And so began Lyra's ordeal as an employee at that coffee shop. A new lifestyle that I would hate. But perhaps little by little I would grow to like him a little. Thanks to that albino who saved her from death. Her new adventures as an exploited worker had begun. End of the prologue. Chapter 1. Monday. 6 in the morning. Headquarters of the Astri family. Lyra opened her eyes lazily in her room, staring at the ceiling. She usually woke up with a bit of a mood to make bombs, as was normal for her. But not this time. Why? Because it was her first day as an exploited and unpaid worker in that tyrant's cafeteria. I enjoyed that week to the fullest because I knew that from now on nothing would ever be the same. I would have used the green bombs, he whispered, knowing he could no longer return to the past. So reluctantly she got out of bed to wash up and start that wonderful day. Yes, very wonderful. Headquarters dining room. The hobbit lazily ate her breakfast accompanied by her friends who smiled as they talked about which places they were going to patrol that day. She would also be talking if it weren't for the fact that she would never patrol again. Why so quiet, Lyra? Rihanna asked with a hint of mockery. Shut your mouth, Rihanna, I'm not in the mood, she whispered, eating her breakfast without looking up. You would have saved yourself all these problems if you weren't such an impulsive lunatic, Kagaya said, eating politely. Look who's talking. Haha, Lyra washing dishes, she doesn't even like washing the ones at headquarters, poor thing, Noin laughed, making the hobbit frown. The haha, Noin is looking for a boyfriend, but sadly nobody pays attention to her, poor thing. The human smile vanished the moment the hobbit said that. Okay, you win, Noin whispered, looking down and eating her breakfast dejectedly. Don't worry, Lyra, everything will be alright, allies tried to reassure her. You'll see, you'll do well in your new job, and if money is what you're worried about, don't worry, you can do my laundry on your day off, and I'll pay you. Wow. That's an amazing idea, allies. Lyra exclaimed with a smile. And not just your clothes, but Kagaya's filthy clothes too, Knees and Iska's bras, Asta's shoes. I could even wear an apron and cook for them, that way they'd all pay me. I'd be like their servant. He didn't need to say anything else. They all noticed the sarcasm in those words. Lyra, Astri said, looking at her daughter. You know I love you very much, and that's why I want you to learn your lesson for your actions. Even though Althea said it would be for a long time, I'm sure this punishment will only last a few weeks, so don't be discouraged. I greatly admire your passion for making bombs, and I know you make them with the sole intention of helping civilians. That's why I hope that when you return from that punishment, you will use those weapons with much more care. I'm sure you will learn many valuable lessons there. Values, they all thought, remembering who the boss of that cafe was. Don't think of this as a punishment. Instead, think of it as a new stage in your life where you will learn new things, and who knows, you might even end up appreciating that type of work. I have to get ready to leave. The moment Lyra said those words, she stood up and walked towards the exit of the dining hall under the watchful gaze of everyone. And when she came out, they all looked at each other. Poor Lyra, I feel sorry for her, Muriu whispered, sympathizing with her friend. Nah, she deserves it for being reckless. Maybe that'll make her think twice, Kaguya said, taking a sip of her coffee. She's always gotten her way, and this time she didn't. It's something she needs. If we're being realistic, almost all of us need something like that too, starting with you, Kaguya, Rihanna said, making the Asian woman frown. Come on, we're supposed to be the family of justice, we have to behave ourselves too. Exactly. They all have to be just like their perfect and beautiful captain. It goes without saying who said that. Narcissistic and stupid. Nguyen asked, earning a whack on the head. I hope Lyra does well, Ryu whispered, wishing her friend all the best. With Lyra. She was walking through the streets of her area with a backpack on her shoulders, heading to her new workplace. This is disgusting, she thought with annoyance, knowing that she would be locked up in that place for more than 8 hours. He could use that time to create another Y-rank bomb, since he only had one, that way his family would be a power in Arario. They would go from being called the Estrie family to the USA. However, that wouldn't be possible. From now on, she would have to wash dishes. What would it have cost him to accept the money to build that coffee shop? He thought, continuing to walk. That way we would all be happy. Part of her told him that he deserved that punishment, but her proud part didn't want to accept it. But there was nothing to be done, she was already chained to work, so she just had to comply, and that was it. And letting out a tired sigh, I arrived at the doors of the cafeteria, seeing that it was already completely remodeled. It seemed to be made of good material. That woman must be a millionaire, he thought, already imagining all the zeros in her bank account. Well, let's go there. And with that said, Lyra opened the door and entered the cafeteria, ready to start her first day of work. But she hadn't even taken 2 steps inside when she received a blow to the head that slammed her to the ground. Who the hell hit me? With pain she raised her gaze, seeing that silver-haired woman standing in front of her with a serious expression. You're 3 minutes late, he said, pointing to the clock on the wall. And that's why he hit me. 5. And a second blow struck, causing him to fall silent. There's a rule here, and that is that you're not allowed to shout. Do you understand? SC. Yes, what? Yes, boss. While the hobbit was being scolded, behind the counter there were 2 people watching her with pity. One of them was Belle, and the other was a small woman with her hair tied in 2 pigtails. It was the goddess Hestia. Is she the Muslim woman who bombed us that you told me about? The goddess asked, looking at the albino. Yes, it's her, she replied with a nervous smile. She's very striking, isn't she? Because of her pink hair. Well, I admit it is, she said, watching as the hobbit continued to be scolded by Althea for being late and raising her voice. For some reason, I feel things will be more lively around here with her around. I agree. Meanwhile, with Lyra. So what am I going to do? He asked, with a bump on his head. Isn't it obvious? You're going to wash all the dirty dishes and cups, so get to work now. You're not here to slack off. And with that said, the tyrannical boss went up to the 2nd floor of that cafe, leaving her 3 employees alone. Dirty plates and cups, there aren't even any customers, she whispered grumpily, seeing the empty place. After that, I walked towards where that little goddess and the smiling albino who put her in that torment were. Welcome to the team, Laura, Belle said, making a vein pop out on his forehead. I'm Lyra, she said grumpily, then looked at Hestia. So besides the 2 of us, there's another employee. Nice to meet you. I am the goddess Hestia, it's good to see someone new in this hell. Goddess? What's a goddess doing working in this place? She asked, confused. I was kidnapped. Huh? Lyra was a little taken aback by that response, but then shook her head slightly. Never mind, I'd better get on with my work, that way I can finish this quickly. Even if you finish quickly, you won't leave until 6 o'clock, Belle reminded him. Be quiet. And with those words, Lyra walked towards what she thought was the kitchen where all the dirty dishes would be, leaving Belle and Hestia alone again. Poor thing, I don't think she'll last long here, Hestia whispered pityingly. Do you think so? Because I think the opposite, she said with a smile. She seems like someone who doesn't give up no matter how difficult things get. I think she'll manage to adapt. I like her. If you say so. With Lyra. Reluctantly, she went into the kitchen and started looking for the dishwasher until she saw it. I walked towards it and could see that there were already a few dirty dishes which I began to count. 16 plates, fine, I can handle this, she thought, grabbing an apron that was there and putting it on, even though it was a little big, but it would keep her clothes dry. Heh, maybe this is easier than I thought. Washing dishes, anyone can do that. And feeling a little more motivated, she started washing the dishes, hoping they would send her back to headquarters because there wasn't much to do. She just had to wash all that, and that would solve the problem. In the end, that punishment wouldn't be such a big deal. How do we tell her? Hestia asked pityingly, peeking through the door and seeing the motivated smile of her new coworker. There's no need to tell him, Belle replied with an amused smile. He'll realize later that it's not as easy as it seems. And with those words they both stopped watching her while Lyra continued washing the dishes, relieved that there were very few. It would end soon. 4 hours later. Lyra's motivated expression had completely disappeared, replaced by one of total frustration and despair as she looked at more than 5 towers of plates in front of her. There were more than 100 of them. And every 10 minutes another tower would arrive, further testing his patience. There's more Letitia here. A strong twitch appeared in Lyra's eye as she watched that smiling albino appear with another tower of plates, placing them in front of her. He was already starting to dislike that boy. What's wrong? Belle asked, raising an eyebrow at her expression. You should smile more. You'll age fast if you always have that look on your face. Lyra, still with that same expression, walked away from the wash basin and headed towards the door to see the cafeteria. Empty. Each of those tables was empty. There was no one else there but Hestia, who was playing with a spinning top, failing miserably on every attempt. How the hell are there so many dishes if there aren't even any customers? Lyra asked, filled with anger. You should be grateful you have a job. Shut up. They don't even pay me. I yelled, wanting to grab something and smash it in that albino's face. Haha, don't get mad, Layla, Belle laughed, walking towards the sink. I'll help you. Between the two of us, we'll definitely finish faster. You still haven't told me how there are so many dishes if there aren't even any customers, she whispered, feeling like she was about to explode, just like her bombs. Belle just turned to look at her and smiled happily before turning his attention back to the dishes. Lyra only saw the back of that albino. It was strange, he always seemed cheerful, and even though there were more than 100 dishes he didn't complain. Are you going to help me? If you don't want to, you can accompany Kami-sama to sweep. Be quiet. And whispering those words, I walked back to the sink and started washing the dishes more quickly, now that they were both together. And my name is Lyra, you idiot. I know, I only changed your name to annoy you, I hope you would laugh or smile, but you always keep a long face. I repeat, you're an idiot. Belle just laughed at what the hobbit said, continuing to wash dishes while she watched him out of the corner of her eye with annoyance. Normally she, like him, took everything as a joke, but this time she was too irritated to be able to do so. Meanwhile, Hestia was peeking out of the door, watching Belle laugh and Lyra complain. It's strange that Belle-kun is acting so cheerful and playful with someone he barely knows, Hestia thought, watching them interact. He really likes her to act like this. Hestia couldn't help but smile happily at that. It makes me happy to see him making friends, even though that hobbit doesn't see him as one, she thought, but then returned to her cheerful demeanor. I don't know why, but for some strange reason I feel those two will be very good friends. Something tells me they have a lot in common. Just then the cafeteria bell rang, signaling that a customer had arrived. So the goddess quickly went to attend to him, leaving the two of them washing the dishes with Belle chatting happily about anything and everything and Lyra listening to him grumpily. He was an annoying boy, or at least that's what Lyra thought at the time. He reminds me of allies, he's so cheerful, even though he doesn't show off, she thought, glancing at him out of the corner of her eye, while continuing to wash the dishes. Lyra didn't know yet, she didn't know that this albino boy would be more than just an irritating boy to her. Perhaps Hestia was right and they had a lot in common. After this, it's your turn to clean the bathrooms. Outer. This was just the beginning. Hours and hours later. Oh, Lyra. You're here, Astrid said with a happy smile as she saw her daughter enter the room. How was your first day? Lyra. 5. The hobbit fell face down on the ground, causing Astrid to worry and go to see what was wrong. Although he was greatly surprised to see that he was only sleeping. Surprisingly, he had gotten much more tired doing that job than he had been on patrol. Keep going, Lyra, I know you can do this, Astrid whispered with a smile, stroking her daughter's hair. Although the hobbit doubted it. He would never get used to that job. And above all, he would never get used to living with that tyrant and that annoying albino. Never. End of chapter. Chapter 2. Finally free. It was Lyra's joyful shout in the Astri family room that startled more than one person. Why? Lyra, it's Sunday, obviously you won't be going to work now, but tomorrow you'll be back to the same thing, Noin reminded her, much to the hobbit's annoyance. Shut up. Nobody can take my happiness away, I'm not going to see that witch's face and that annoying rabbit all day, and that's more than enough for me. It had been a week since Lyra started working as a slave in Althea's cafe, a week that was a complete hell for her. But now that it was Sunday, I could enjoy the day as much as I wanted without seeing the faces of those evil people. And since it was his day off, he would do what he loved most. Blow things up. I would go to the dungeon and throw bombs at all those monsters, thinking I was their boss's witch. It would be a perfect day just that day, because afterwards I would have to repeat the 6 days of hell. I haven't seen her so happy in days, Muriu said with a smile. Good for her. It'll only be for today, tomorrow it'll be the same again, Kagaya mocked, knowing that her happiness would be short-lived. It seems you haven't adapted to your job yet, Astri said with a slight smile, catching the hobbit's attention. Never. I hate that place. They treat me like an unpaid servant, giving me orders every minute. It's awful, she said, recalling those 6 days of hell. I hope this ends soon. The more you want it to end, the longer it will last, Iska said, munching on some cookies. My advice is to start enjoying this place. Once you love working at this coffee shop, the punishment will end. It's inevitable. Once you get used to a job, you get fired. It's impossible for me to love a place like that, Lyra laughed in disgust. But I know it will end soon, I'm sure of it. I hope the punishment lasts for her for life, Rihanna thought, seeing that her little friend still hadn't learned her lesson despite those hellish days. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to enjoy my day off properly. See you later. And eager to blow things up, the hobbit left the room, leaving her family in silence. I'm starting to think Lyra will never learn her lesson, Nee said with a sigh. I agree, Rihanna chimed in. Do you believe that? Astri asked with a smile, standing at the window watching the hobbit leave the headquarters with her backpack full of bombs. I feel like things will change. Something tells me there's going to be a change in that cafe. That's the spirit, Astri-sama. I believe in Lyra too. Allies exclaimed joyfully. This is a sudden change for her, but we just need to give her some time, and we'll see the change. You have a lot of hope in her, admit it, people don't change, Kagaya said with boredom. Just because you can't change doesn't mean others can't, Ryu whispered, causing a vein to pop out on the Asian woman's forehead. I think she should take Iska's advice, Asta said. She should start enjoying that job so she gets fired. Yes. That's the solution. While they were talking, Astri just watched with a smile the place where Lyra had gone. I believe in you, Lyra, he thought, remembering that little orphan girl he had met years ago, that girl who was so defensive in an alley. She, more than anyone, has gradually changed over the years. I loved the current Lyra, but her impulse to throw bombs without remorse was a problem. And he knew he could change that part of his personality in that place. I believe in you. Meanwhile, with Lyra. She was already in the dungeon, specifically on the 5th floor, bombing everything she saw. Grrrr. A rabid goblin approached her with the intention of killing her. A mini Althea swallow this. Pulling out a small bomb, I forced the goblin to swallow it and seconds later it was blown to pieces by the explosion inside. How I miss doing this, she thought with a smile, taking in the large number of monster corpses everywhere. I feel alive. Her goal was to reach the 13th floor of the dungeon. If she decided to go down to the 18th floor on her own, it would be very difficult for her, so it was better to stay safe. In addition, she didn't bring her special weapons, so she was limited with the bombs. I'll just be bombing around here for a little while, and then I'll go home, he thought with a smile as he walked down the corridors. It'll be a good place to de-stress. Just thinking about having to work there tomorrow made her stomach churn, so she decided not to think about it. That day was for enjoying myself, and I was going to do it to the fullest. Okay, let's continue. And with a smile, he continued walking, attacking the monsters. Some he killed with bombs and others with his bare fists, although hand-to-hand combat was not his strong suit, he could defend himself. The day looked like it should have been a quiet and pleasant one for her, without any problems. A very special Sunday. Unfortunately, that wouldn't stay the case. Oh. But it's Lyra. The hobbit's cheerful expression turned to one of total annoyance when she heard a voice behind her back. I don't believe it, he thought wearily. Irritated, she turned around to see who had called her, hoping it was just her imagination. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Wow, I didn't expect to see you around here. That's great. Standing before her was Belle, smiling happily at having found her in the dungeon. The one who wasn't happy was Lyra, who knew that her spectacular day was over. This is supposed to be my day off, he thought irritably, bringing a hand to his head, knowing that now everything would be a nuisance. She really didn't like that albino. All he did was bother her at work and call her by the wrong name every 2 minutes. It was very irritating. It seems we both plan to do the same things today, Belle said, approaching her with a smile. It's good to see you. I'm sorry I don't share that feeling, I whispered, looking away. Haha, come on, relax. We're not at work for you to treat me like that, he laughed, not showing any offense at those words. Today is a day to enjoy. She really reminded him of allies with that cheerful attitude she carried. She was like a female version of her, only without the narcissism. Aha, Lyra said, turning her back on him and continuing to walk, Belle following her. So what are you doing here? I didn't know you were an adventurer. I'm not. Oh? Then why are you here? I asked, looking at him in surprise. I just came to unwind for a while. To me, an adventurer is someone who does nothing but adventure, and I'm not. I bake desserts at the cafe, she replied with a slight smile. In fact, this is only the second time I've come down here. Second time? Lyra already thought that all of this would be a headache. That idiot was most likely going to stick to him in the dungeon, a complete novice who didn't even have armor or weapon. It was a miracle he'd made it to the 5th floor as a complete novice, but then he remembered she'd been killing all the monsters, so he probably hadn't run into anyone. It would be a burden to have him with her. Actually, I came to the city with the goal of being an adventurer, but to be honest, I found the dungeon a bit boring, so I decided to help my mom at the cafe instead, he explained cheerfully. Boring, Lyra thought, rolling her eyes. He had probably only reached the 1st floor and killed 3 or 4 goblins, believing himself invincible, thus abandoning the topic of adventure. And it was better that way. Someone with that mentality would die quickly in that place. Well, good for you for feeling happy preparing cakes, the hobbit congratulated, taking a bomb and throwing it at a group of more than 10 goblins, who were blown to bits. Do you make those bombs? Belle asked curiously, walking beside him. Why are you following me? She asked, annoyed. I'm really lost, so I'm going to stick with you until we get out of this place. Last time I managed to get out by a miracle, he explained with a nervous smile. The hobbit let out a tired sigh upon hearing those words, knowing it would be a nuisance, but she wouldn't leave him to his fate either. If something were to happen to him, she wouldn't have peace of mind for the rest of her life, and besides, her witch of a mother would kill her. Yes, I make them myself, she replied, taking out a blue bomb and giving it to Belle to look at. It was the weakest bomb, so there was no problem. Incredible, he whispered, observing the design of the bomb. Making bombs is what I love most, more than a hobby in my job. It's great, she said with a smile. Having a job you really love is the best thing there is. There's nothing better than enjoying what you do. Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. They usually think I'm crazy when I tell them what I like to do. And they're telling the truth, you're crazy and stupid, she said, making a vein pop out on the hobbit's forehead. But that doesn't change the fact that it's incredible, believe it or not, making bombs is an art, like baking cakes. What a comparison. I'm not lying, both are similar in preparation, if you overdo anything it will be a failure. You talk as if you've already created bombs. In fact, I've already made some. The hobbit stopped upon hearing those words, turning to look at him, a little surprised. Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes. In the town where I lived, I used to make some, but they're nothing like yours. They were just stink and smoke bombs, most of them didn't even explode, she explained with a nervous smile. The same thing happened to me, Lyra said nostalgically. My first bombs were a complete disaster, pathetic things. Haha, I can imagine. And why were you making bombs? She asked curiously. Without realizing it, the hobbit was calmly chatting with that albino she claimed to hate. In the village there was a man who made fireworks, he taught me how to make them, and that's where I learned to make the stinking and smoke ones. Really? I learned with fireworks too. Lyra said with an excited smile. Oh. What? What's wrong? So you can smile, Belle said with a grin, seeing the hobbit's cheerful expression. I must admit you took me by surprise. You should smile more often. If you wanted to ruin the conversation, you've succeeded. And abandoning her joy, she returned to her bored expression and continued walking, but not before taking the bomb from his hands and putting it away. He didn't even realize when he smiled. He simply began to enjoy the conversation upon learning that he had learned to make bombs using the same methods. But I wouldn't give him the pleasure of seeing her smile again. Oh, come on Lyra, we were doing fine, Belle said with amusement, seeing that she had reverted to her old ways. Why, of all people, he had to have the same taste for bombs, the hobbit thought with annoyance. I wanted to ask him many more things, such as what other bombs he could manufacture or why he had stopped manufacturing them. But he would put up with it. He was supposed to be his enemy at work, so he didn't have to talk. "I'm on Lorena, let's keep talking." "Soy Lyra." Crack. They both stopped abruptly upon hearing the sound of a heavy footstep. Looking ahead, they saw 3 minotaurs walking towards them with an enormous thirst for blood. "Minotaurs?" Lyra whispered, puzzled. "We're on the 6th floor. What the hell are they doing here?" "Are those minotaurs?" "I imagined them differently, to be honest," said Belle, a little surprised by their appearance. "DSK, what a nuisance, those idiots must have come running up from downstairs." Taking out some bombs, he started walking towards those 3 monsters. "Hey, you fool, you'd better stay back if you don't want to die." "I'll try to kill them as quickly as possible," the hobbit ordered, annoyed. Understood. Belle accepted the order, wanting to see how she fought. Rawr. Although at that moment another sound was heard, this time behind Belle. Looking back, they saw a large horde of monsters from those floors heading towards the albino. There were at least 30. This time Lyra was frightened to see that they were surrounded on both sides by 3 minotaurs and that horde of monsters. She wouldn't normally worry if she was with one of her friends, but she was with Belle. If that idiot wasn't careful, he was going to die. "DSK. Idiot, find a safe place or try to avoid being attacked by that horde. I'll quickly kill these 3 minotaurs and come help you." Then taking the bombs, Lyra ran to get rid of the 3 most annoying monsters as quickly as possible and then prevent her unwanted companion from being harmed. Meanwhile, Belle just stood there watching as Lyra went to fight the 3 minotaurs and then looked at the horde. "You shouldn't be here." Lyra jumped, dodging a punch that was coming towards her and then connected with a kick to the minotaur's face, making him take a few steps back. Then taking one of his grade B bombs, he threw it at the monster and retreated. The bomb exploded, causing the minotaur's torso to be blown to pieces. One less, she thought, dodging a kick that was coming towards her. He had to hurry before it was too late for the albino fool. All because he clung to me. He's an idiot. Lyra jumped from side to side, dodging the bull's kicks and punches. "Swallow this." Quickly and agilely, I grabbed 2 grade C bombs and threw them into the monster's mouth the moment it opened it. His head blew to pieces when his teeth touched the bomb. "Do less." At the last second, Lyra dodged a blow that was going towards her head, looking annoyed at the last minotaur, who began to throw a flurry of punches. But Lyra didn't just spend her time locked up creating bombs, she also trained, and that could be seen in her great speed and agility, dodging each of those punches. He was strong. Annoying. And without waiting any longer, I hit his throat with a bomb, taking advantage of the fact that the monster lost his balance due to a kick to his feet, a mini bomb that stuck to its target. Boom. And the bomb exploded, sending the head of the last minotaur flying, causing the hobbit to let out a sigh of relief at being rid of those nuisances. But that wasn't over. "Quick, idiot. Go back." Lyra took an A-grade bomb to throw at the horde in the hope that they hadn't torn Belle to pieces. If I looked at him torn to pieces, I probably wouldn't be able to sleep for many nights. Even though she disliked him, she didn't want to see him dead. But she stopped in shock at what her eyes saw. Standing in front of her was Belle, in the same place where she had left him, there with a lively smile as always. And behind where the huge horde of monsters was supposed to be, there was nothing, only a large number of magic stones scattered all over the ground. "What?" Lyra said. "What about what?" Belle asked. "What in the horde of monsters?" he asked in shock, putting the bomb back in his backpack. "Which monsters? Don't play dumb with me. Where's the horde of monsters that was behind you?" she asked, still bewildered, approaching him. "Well, I don't know," he replied, shrugging his shoulders. "They just disappeared, that's all. Maybe they were magicians." "They disappeared, yeah right. And all those magic stones?" Lyra asked, still not understanding anything. "What did you do?" "Stay still just as you ordered me to. You don't even have a weapon. How did you manage to kill them all? And why do you think it was me?" "Because you're the only one here besides me." He wouldn't believe that story about it not being him when there was no one else around. He must have done something to make that whole horde disappear in seconds. Wasn't he a rookie? Speaks. I'm not going to talk to someone who refused to talk to me before," she said with a smile, turning her back and walking the way they had come. "I don't know what happened, I already told you they just disappeared." "You wretched rabbit," Lyra whispered, wanting to know what had happened. She was sure he had something to do with it all. They were the only 2 there, after all. "Tell me what you did." "Nothing, maybe they got scared when they saw you massacring those minotaurs and decided to kill themselves," he said with a joking smile without stopping walking. "Haha, how funny, you should be a clown," said the hobbit, now following him. "Speak." With all that going on, he forgot to investigate why there were minotaurs on that floor, even though some members of the Loki family had already taken care of eliminating the last ones. "Oh, by the way. We're opening the cafeteria earlier tomorrow, so you need to be there at 7 o'clock sharp." "Are you serious?" I asked, annoyed. Wait, don't change the subject. What did you do with those monsters? Hey, it's true I said the dungeon is boring, but being with you is fun. We have to team up every Sunday. He exclaimed excitedly, looking at the hobbit who was frowning. What do you say? I'm saying you're a hateful, stupid rabbit. Then it's a yes. Resigning himself to the fact that he wouldn't say anything, he let out a tired sigh and began walking towards the exit of the dungeon. Lyra hated him, he was irritating, but she had to admit that he had now gained some of her attention because of what he did and because they had similar tastes in bombs. But it was still irritating. What time did you say tomorrow? At 7 o'clock. Curse. Lyra didn't know it, but things would change from now on. At that moment I never imagined it. She never imagined it. That she and that silly rabbit would be closer than she thought. My advice is to start enjoying that place. Perhaps Iska's words would come true. Only time will tell. End of chapter. Chapter 3. We are in the kitchen of Alfia's cafe, the quietest cafe in Arario. In that kitchen was a certain albino with a smile, happily preparing cakes. He liked to bake cakes. It was something his mother taught him and it became more than just a hobby for him. There was nothing better than loving your job. And finally. I take some strawberries from a bell container and place them on top of the cake, giving it a prettier look. Perfect. And with a proud smile, she finished preparing her fourth cake of the day, which she took and put in the refrigerator that ran on magic stones. Perhaps I should prepare more. Tomorrow is Friday, and people usually come to buy on that day, he thought, tapping his chin with a finger. Yes, I'll do that. And with the decision made, she began to prepare all the materials to create another cake. But before doing so, he glanced back, seeing Lyra looking at him out of the corner of her eye while washing the dishes. That amused him a little. Is something wrong, Lyra? He asked curiously. Give me a moment, she said, without stopping washing the dishes. For the past few days, the hobbit had stopped complaining about working there, and it wasn't because she loved that cafe anymore. She simply realized that it was stupid to complain every day, so she just accepted her fate without further ado. And as strange as it seemed, he was already starting to get used to waking up every day with the thought of going to work. Just as Iska told him, the less he thought about it, the sooner that punishment would end without him even noticing. Do you need something? Belle asked curiously, watching the hobbit dry her hands after washing the dishes and walk towards him. Actually, yes, she replied, now standing in front of him. There's something I've been thinking about all these days that I still don't understand. Really? And what would that be? I've been watching you non-stop since Monday. Yes, I've noticed that, I can feel when someone is watching me, I explained with a nervous smile. And I haven't stopped thinking about what you told me that day either. Huh? About what? Well, what the hell is the difference between making a cake and making a bomb? I asked, completely confused. No matter how much I watch you bake cakes, I just don't get it. I simply don't understand your strange comparison. Belle's curious expression turned into a smile upon hearing Lyra's words. I understand, so that's why, she said, trying not to laugh. I didn't think you were still thinking about those words. I haven't stopped thinking about it since that day, no matter how hard I try, I can't stop thinking about that stupid comparison of yours. He had made more of a mess of his mind about that than about figuring out how Belle killed all those monsters without him noticing. They don't look alike at all, said the hobbit, looking at the empty flour container. Of course, I'm even sure that you, who are a professional at making bombs, will find it very easy to prepare a cake with a smile. Belle began to clean the table. Me? Not to brag, but I've never even touched a stove in my life, she said, crossing her arms. How do you know I'm going to bake a good cake? Belle did not answer, he just walked to a small bookshelf that was in a corner of the kitchen. There were only about 5 books, all 5 of them were about cooking recipes and such. What are you doing? You have talent, Lyra, I can tell just by looking at you, he said, glancing through the book. And I know you can use that talent for many other things. Really? Now you think you can tell people's talents just by looking at them, huh? The hobbit laughed with a touch of humor and sarcasm. I can't cook or anything like that. You won't know unless you try, she said, walking back to Lyra with a specific page in the book. That's what my mom used to tell me when I refused to bake cakes with her back in town. Can that woman bake? Obviously, she taught me everything I know, she said with a slight smile. And believe me, it wasn't as difficult as I thought. If I could make smoke bombs and stink bombs, baking a cake was easier. The hobbit only looked at the albino with doubt. She never bothered to cook. That was something her goddess and one of her friends always took care of. And when she was a street child she used to steal food, or sometimes some ally on the street would share what they had with her. That was until the street decided to take care of her. The only time I touched a kitchen was when there was no one at headquarters at breakfast time. At that moment I prepared some scrambled eggs which turned out well, but only because I had seen my goddess prepare them. Aside from that, I doubted I could prepare anything else. Here. Belle gave the book to Lyra and she took it and read the page he pointed to. Chocolate almond cake, I whispered as I read the recipe. Do you really want me to make this? Yes. There's a first time for everything, he said excitedly. And I feel you'll do well. Seriously, Rabbit, I don't want to bake cakes, she said wearily. Besides, what if they turn out badly? I'll waste so many ingredients and the witch and the boss will be furious. Don't worry, Mom won't be mad, besides, you'll do great, she encouraged, giving a thumbs up. I believe in you. Ah. The hobbit just let out a tired sigh when she saw that her co-worker kept insisting. Belcun. At that moment the goddess Hestia entered the kitchen calling the albino. What's wrong, Kami-sama? He asked, watching as she took off her apron and put on a cap. I'm going to drop off a few orders around town, so I want you to take care of the register for a while, she said as she took a few pastries from the refrigerator. Understood. Are they also going to deliver packages in person? Asked the curious hobbit. Even though they pay us a little more for the trip, in the future you and I will also go and deliver cakes. Well, I'm off. I'll leave the rest to you, Belcun. And with those words the little goddess left the cafeteria, leaving them both alone in the kitchen once again. I suppose I'll be greeting the customers, Belle whispered. In the meantime, you can prepare the cake. I already told you that. It's easy. Just read the instructions as if you were going to make a bomb and your mind will go into automatic mode. And with those words, Belle also left the kitchen, leaving the hobbit alone. She just let out a tired sigh when she realized she never understood. So, what's that witch of a boss doing? She just spends all her time upstairs, she thought, annoyed, although it was better that way since she hardly saw her all day. Never mind. Bored, the hobbit put the book down on a table and sat down in a chair. For the moment there were no dirty dishes and the bathrooms were clean, so you could say I had some free time. I doubted Belle needed help serving customers. He seemed like the kind of person who could do it on his own. I curiously look at the recipe in the book, slowly reading each of the steps to prepare the cake. Many ingredients were used and apparently, he had the right amount of each one to make it perfect. Just read the instructions as if you were going to make a bomb and your mind will go into automatic mode. Lyra frowned slightly as she recalled those words, then looked around the kitchen. To bake a cake, she whispered. I had never tried doing anything other than making bombs. Perhaps this is the perfect opportunity to do something new in your life. I can't believe I'm going to listen to him, she thought, picking up the book and walking towards the work table. But he had to admit that he was very curious and wanted to see if what the albino said was true. I'll make a mess of things, he thought, putting the book down on a chair and going to wash his hands. That idiot Kagaya will probably be laughing at me when she sees what I'm planning. If only I could do it right, I'd show her I'm good for more than just making bombs. For some reason, thinking about those words gave him a little more motivation to try. It didn't matter if he failed, because at least he tried, and besides, according to him, the boss didn't mind losing a little material. It was a clear message that the coffee shop was like a hobby for her, which is why it was so peaceful working there. Although he hated working, he had to admit that they didn't demand too much of him. But that wasn't the point, I had to try to bake that cake. Let's see, flour, eggs, sugar, everything has to be an exact amount. Being used to creating bombs with the exact materials, she was able to understand that much better, to know the measurement of each thing. Let's see what happens. And with those thoughts the hobbit got to work, but not before putting on an apron and a hat. Belle had gotten her some in her size just in case. For the first time, Lyra was doing something of her own volition other than creating bombs. I just hoped it would turn out alright. Meanwhile, with Belle. He was at the checkout waiting for a customer to arrive. The cafe was almost never full. They had around 15 customers throughout the day, or a little more. But it wasn't something that discouraged anyone, since they weren't desperate for the place to be a success. They were fine like that. She was always curious to know why her mother decided to open a coffee shop and sell all kinds of desserts, in addition to coffee. I never asked him because I doubted he would say anything. She never told him anything about her life. Her mother was a complete mystery. I think coming here was the best option, she thought with a slight smile. Obviously, they had a small cafe in the village, but for some reason she decided to close it and open one in Arario instead. At first he didn't really agree with it, but he accepted. And he felt happy for two reasons. Because there were more customers trying her cakes, she liked seeing them happy when they ate one. And also because Arario seemed fun to him. In the town everyone was an adult and he had to admit that it was somewhat boring. But not here, he only had one friend, or so he thought Lyra was, and he had a lot of fun with her. It was nice being with her. It's a shame it's only temporary, she thought with a faint disheartened smile. Just then, the bell of a new customer rang in the place, pulling him out of his thoughts. It is true that they had few customers during the day, but there were some who were loyal, buying there every day. I remembered every single one of those customers' faces. But there was one that stood out among them all. Hello, Belle. The blue-eyed Amazon girl who came every day to shop. She was a very flirtatious girl, or at least that's how she acted with him, always trying to strike up a conversation with him every time he arrived. What stood out most about her was the very revealing neckline she always wore. Every day that neckline got bigger. According to Hestia, that girl came with other intentions besides buying cake, something Belle didn't quite understand. "Hi Jenny," Belle greeted the girl now known as Jenny with a friendly smile. The most loyal customer since she had started buying from the second day of opening. Fortunately for the girl, she had not met Alfia, as Alfia would have instantly realized her intentions. "I'm so glad to see you," the girl whispered, leaning against the counter at an angle where Belle could see a certain part of her perfectly. "I'm glad to see you too," she said, happy that she always came to shop there, completely ignoring her posture. "You're a regular customer here every day. That makes me happy." "Believe me, I'm happier to see you," the girl thought, looking at Belle with desire. "What are you going to bring today?" I asked, ready to write everything down. "A strawberry cake," she ordered with a flirty smile. "A cake to go. Perfect. And what to drink?" "Your milk." "The fact that." Milk with coffee, also to go," she asked with a sweet smile. "Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add? Can you be included in the order?" he asked, touching Belle's chest with his finger. "That way we can go somewhere together." Thanks for the invitation, but I'll have to decline it again." Belle had already been asked out more than 5 times by that girl, but he always politely declined. "That's too bad, but you know where to find me. I already gave you my address after all." Cute, she winked as she leaned closer so Belle could see her cleavage. Which didn't work. "Thank you for the compliment," she said with a kind smile, beginning to prepare everything the Amazon had requested. "TSK," she clicked her tongue slightly, seeing that her insinuations hadn't worked again. "What do I have to do to get him to notice me?" Ever since she met him, she had been wanting him. She was smitten the first time she saw him when she went shopping. When she saw him smiling on the other side of the counter, she just thought. That boy has to be mine. And since then a month had passed and I hadn't achieved anything. I had to admit that he's hard to win over. "Here's your order, it'll be 8,000 valis," Belle said, handing the girl a small box with her order, which she took and gave him the money. "Thanks, handsome," she said, winking at him. "See you tomorrow." And so the girl turned around and began to walk in a very flirtatious way, swaying her hips from side to side in the hope that Belle would stare at a certain spot. "Damn it," thought the albino as he dropped some coins and had to bend down to pick them up, not noticing the seductive walk just for him. And so the flirtatious customer of the day had left. Belle just looked in the direction the girl went and then let out a tired sigh. "He's persistent," she thought with a nervous smile. The truth is that Belle pretended not to notice anything. He knew perfectly well what that girl's intentions were. After all, the younger women in town, around 18 and 20 years old, did the same thing when he was on duty. But they didn't last long because Alfia always scared them away. It wouldn't surprise him if that was the reason he decided to close the cafe in the village, because of the constant girls who wanted something with him in the village. After all, a boy with white hair and red eyes wasn't something you saw every day. "I wonder what Lyra is doing." Then putting that girl aside, she walked towards the door and peeked out to see what her hobbit companion was doing. A small smile formed on Belle's face as she watched her preparing a cream for the cake, seeing that she had already completed more than half of the procedure. She looked very focused on what she was doing. "Let's see, 2 eggs," she whispered as she continued whipping the cream, oblivious to everything around her. For some reason, Belle found it cute to see her so focused. She didn't know why, but all her expressions were cute. Angry, irritated, nervous, focused, and even though I only saw her once, when she was smiling. All those expressions made her look unique, which is why he liked to tease her, because it was funny to see her reactions. He wasn't lying when he said he really enjoyed her company. Bombing the cafeteria was the best thing that little terrorist could have done. Clink. The sound of the bell reached him, a sign of a new customer. Well, I let her continue making her cake. And still smiling, Belle went to attend to the customer, leaving the focused hobbit alone. Even though she didn't say it, she had to admit that. He was enjoying doing that. Hours later. It was about half an hour until closing time, it was almost 6 in the evening. At that time there were no customers left, so the 3 employees were in the kitchen of the place. Hestia, Belle and Lyra. The 3 of them were standing in front of a table which had a medium-sized cake on it. It was the cake the hobbit made. It had been in the fridge for a few hours, so it was ready for them to try it. You still need to work on the decoration, Hestia commented, seeing that she only had a few almonds on top of the chocolate layer. I couldn't think of anything decent, to be honest, Lyra confessed. Although the decoration is the least of my worries. You're right, taste is what matters, said the smiling albino, taking a knife and cutting 3 slices for each of them. Lyra felt a little nervous because she didn't know if the cake turned out well or badly. I really hoped it turned out well since she enjoyed making that cake, just like Belle said. He shut down his mind and just thought about making one more bomb, which made him work faster. I want you to be honest with your opinion, Lyra asked them both. I don't like any of this talk of compassion to avoid hurting feelings. Don't worry, I'm honest, so if it's horrible I'll let you know, Hestia said, clearly telling the truth. Although I don't want to hurt you, I will also tell you the truth, Lyra, Belle promised with a slight smile. I hope so. So the albino began to serve the cake on each plate and gave them to both of them. Obviously Lyra wouldn't try it yet. She wanted to see what their reactions would be when they tried it. If it tasted awful, well at least I tried. I didn't even know why he cared so much if she didn't like working there. Perhaps it was because of a desire to do something right. It was strange. Well, let's try it. So Belle and Hestia took a small piece of their piece of cake and ate it, starting to chew it and analyze the flavor. It was a chocolate and almond cake, one of the simplest recipes, but that didn't mean it was easy. It required a lot of skill to make. So? How is it? Lyra asked, seeing them both chewing, waiting for her verdict. Although seconds later he could see both of their eyes shining. Oh. This is delicious. Exclaimed Hestia, taking another piece and eating it. It tastes great. Huh? Really? Asked the hobbit, surprised. Yes. Belle said, taking another piece and eating it. It's delicious. Lyra looked at them both in surprise, but also a little doubtful as she looked at her piece of cake. But before he decided to try it, someone else entered the kitchen. Why is there so much noise? The one who asked that question was Althea, who entered with a slightly curious expression. I know. Lyra quickly cut a piece of the cake and put it on a plate, then hurried towards Althea. Here you go, he said, handing her the plate. Huh? Is this a new creation of Belle's? I asked, picking up the plate and examining the portion. Actually, Lyra made that cake, Belle clarified with a smile. And it's delicious, Kami-sama is already on his second slice. You? Said Althea, looking at the hobbit in surprise. I didn't know you could bake cakes. In fact, it's my first time. Althea just cut off a small piece of her portion and began to chew it, analyzing it under the hobbit's watchful gaze. If anyone was going to be honest, it had to be her. If it tasted horrible, I wouldn't hesitate to crush its pride. I like the cakes Belle makes better, Althea said after tasting it. But Mom. Even so, Althea observed the cake before looking at the hobbit. It tastes good, even if it's your first time. The hobbit's eyes sparkled a little when she heard that. If there's ever a lot of work at the cafeteria, you can help Belle in the kitchen. You have a talent for it. And with that said, Althea left with a slice of cake in her hands, probably going to her office. I told you Lyra, it's very delicious. Confirmed, Hestia added, going for her third portion. The hobbit simply glanced at her portion and finally decided to try it herself. And the moment she tasted it, her eyes opened in surprise and a question began to linger in her mind. Did she really make that cake? Haha, that was the same expression I made when I tasted my first cake, Belle laughed at the hobbit's expression. Although seconds later he was speechless when he saw her eyes light up and a happy smile form on her face. I did it. I managed to bake a cake. He exclaimed happily, approaching the albino. You were right with your idea, Belle. It turned out perfectly. Oh yes, great, the albino whispered, looking away. I'm happy for you. Hestia only observed Belle's reaction when Lyra approached him with a big smile because of his achievement. Perhaps the hobbit didn't notice because of her happiness, but she did. A funny smile appeared on his face when he saw that reaction. We have to celebrate this. Exclaimed the hobbit, still happy. I think I saw a full bottle of soda in the fridge. But Lyra, it's already 6 o'clock, Hestia reminded him. It's time to go back home. On previous occasions, the hobbit would quickly leave the cafeteria as soon as the clock struck 6. But this time. So what? We have to celebrate. I shouted, still excited, going to get the soda from the fridge. Come on, Belle, help me get the glasses. Why yes, the albino agreed, still seeing the hobbit smile happily. Congratulations on your achievement. Thank you, she said, still smiling. Hestia watched them with a slight smile as they chatted about Lyra's achievement and what other cakes to bake in the coming days. A small smile appeared on Hestia's face as she saw the albino's expressions while chatting with the cheerful hobbit. Oh Belle, at first I had my doubts, but now you've confirmed it, she thought with amusement. How cute. So for about an hour the three of them chatted and ate the cake that the hobbit had prepared, who still couldn't believe that she had done it. That was definitely a different kind of day for Lyra at that coffee shop. And perhaps that was the beginning of a new stage in that work. To start enjoying working there, or rather, than having the company of that albino. End of chapter. Chapter 4. A very curious duo was walking through the streets of Arario. It was Belle and Lyra who were carrying a few boxes in their hands. In addition to the boxes they were also wearing a cap with a rabbit logo. It was the logo of the cafeteria. "Can I ask why we're wearing hats?" Lyra asked, a little uncomfortable since she wasn't used to wearing them. "Kami-sama had them made for when we went to deliver orders, I like them," replied the smiling albino. "Well, not me." They were both working as delivery drivers at the time. Since there weren't many customers in the coffee shop, they decided to deliver all the orders together. Lyra thought that was a good change. It had been a long time since she had walked around the city, it was a breath of fresh air. "So where do we have to go?" Lyra asked curiously, looking around. "Well, we have to leave 2 cakes at Diane's hospital," she replied, making her companion a little surprised. "I think the captain of that family is having a birthday and her colleagues want to celebrate." "I understand. And the others are 2 people in certain parts of the city, it won't take us much work, really," he finished speaking with a smile. For some reason, he felt happy to be working as a delivery driver that day. Perhaps because this time he wasn't alone. Out of the corner of my eye, I glance at Lyra as I think about it. From that day on, when she baked that cake, their relationship had improved. She no longer glared at him every minute and no longer spoke to him in a hostile manner. Now she seemed more relaxed working in that place, she even started leaving the cafe a little late because she stayed to help tidy things up. He wasn't sure, but he was hopeful that she would get used to working there, even though he sometimes forgot that it was all a punishment and that she wasn't even getting paid. Obviously, when they tell him he can leave, he will do so without hesitation. "Do you miss patrolling?" Belle asked, breaking the silence. "I'd be lying if I said no," I whispered, looking at the rooftops and remembering how I used to jump up there every day. "But what can you do? This is my new job until your mother decides I don't have to work there anymore." "I imagine it's annoying working in the cafeteria every day," said Belle, looking away. But Lyra didn't answer, she just kept walking beside him. It seemed that the question had given him something to think about, although Belle thought it was a yes. "I guess she preferred to die at my mom's hands than work with us," she thought, although she immediately dismissed the idea, remembering the fearful expression she had that day. So they both continued walking through the city until they reached the first client's house. They were usually people who didn't have much time to go and pick up the cake and placed the order a few days in advance. Althea didn't mind as long as they paid a little more and she wasn't going to leave. "Let's see," Mr. Max, Belle said, looking at the cake. "Ever since we opened the cafe, he's been ordering a cake from us every week, sometimes cookies or other kinds of bread." "Do you make other types of bread?" Lyra asked curiously. "Yes, although cake is our best seller, so we don't usually make much of it," she replied, walking towards the door. "You'll place the order, Lyra." "Eh? Yes, that way you learn." The hobbit just rolled her eyes wearily upon hearing that, as she thought she would only be accompanying the rabbit, not serving them. But oh well, work is work. "And remember, Lyra, flatter the customer, make them feel good," advised the rabbit. "Yes, yes, nice words," he said listlessly, walking towards the door and knocking twice. When she knocked seconds later, a middle-aged man opened the door and saw the hobbit. "And? I love you," said Lyra, her eyes wide and a big smile on her face. When the guy saw that, he simply slammed the door in his face. "I think you went too far," Lyra, Belle said with a nervous smile. "Ah, I only did what you asked," the hobbit said irritably, knocking on the door again, hoping it wouldn't close again. "What do you want?" "Get away," the guy on the other side of the door demanded. "Mr. Max, it's me." But Belle's voice made the customer open the door again. "Oh, so it's you, Belle," he said with a smile, looking at the albino. Sorry about my coworker, she's new to this job," she apologized as Lyra let out a tired sigh. "Haha, it shows, I was scared for a moment," the man laughed, taking the cake in his hands. "How much is it?" 10,000 whales, sir." "Great. That's why I like your cafe, they don't have ridiculous prices like Mia's bar. I once ordered delivery and they charged me triple the original price. It was crazy." The guy exclaimed indignantly. "Haha, you're right, I've seen the prices and I must say yes, they are somewhat exaggerated. They should change their cafe into a restaurant bar, they'd surely give the fertility hostess some competition," the man advised, handing the money to Belle. "My mom doesn't want competitions or anything like that, but thanks for the recommendation." So Belle said goodbye to the man and began walking with Lyra again through the city. "You make it look easy," said the hobbit. "It's easy, didn't you ever talk to civilians when you were helping them with something?" Well, yes, but. Perfect, then just do the same thing you did when you were talking to those civilians, and that's it. Are you sure? Asked the hobbit, raising an eyebrow. Absolutely. You'll see it will be easier for you. If you say so. A playful smile appeared on Lyra's face as she already had a plan, and for some reason Belle had a bad feeling about that smile. Talk. An elderly woman opened the door the moment she heard a knock. And? Madam, stay calm. Shouted the hobbit, startling the lady. What? Peaput. Don't worry. Everything will be alright, but you have to be alert. There might still be an active bomb. The old woman began to feel afraid when she heard that. And I don't. We've brought him his cake, but he's still in mortal danger. We have to do something quickly before it's too late. Why yes. What do I have to do? Enjoy the cake while we eliminate the danger. While Lyra tried to calm the woman she herself had upset, Belle just watched her for a few seconds before slapping his face. I don't know why I expected something like this, and it's my fault since I asked for it, she thought, shaking her head slightly as she watched Lyra's amused smile. She really was a unique girl. Moments later. Ha ha ha. It's not funny, Lyra, Belle said when he saw her laughing. Haha, sorry, I won't do it again, she apologized, wiping away a tear. But it's your fault. You told me to act like I do when I help civilians. Ugh, I know, but I didn't think you'd act like that. I was just saying to use the confidence you have at that moment. I know, it was just a joke. In the end the old lady left happy with the cake. And he almost went somewhere else, I whispered with a nervous smile. Thus they both continued to do their work as they walked through the streets of Verario. Their next and final target was Diane's hospital, and they finished everything to return to the cafeteria. It had been a quiet and uneventful day if you disregarded the hobbit's jokes. Can you tell me why your mom never does anything? To make the walk more bearable, Lyra decided to start another conversation with a question that had been on her mind for some time. Why do you ask? Since I started working here, I haven't seen her help with anything. She just spends all her time locked in her office or goes out and comes back late. Let's see, imagine that she is attending to the customers. The hobbit let her imagination run wild, picturing that scenario. It didn't take him long to understand what his colleague meant. Oh. Do you understand now? I think so. I wish she would clean the floor with a rag. He won't do that. The only answer he gives is, that's what Hestia is for, and he leaves. I feel sorry for her. Over time, Kami-sama got used to it. Lyra didn't want to imagine what Hestia went through to get used to that treatment. Curious, she went from being a goddess to the slave of a mortal. And so, between conversations, they both arrived at the last place, which was the Diane family hospital. This time Belle decided to deliver the order, since they had to deliver it to the back door. It was a surprise party for the saint, so they didn't have to reveal anything. Fortunately, that last order went well without any complications, finishing the orders for that day. And that would be all, said Belle, stretching out her arms. Good job, Lyra. For your first day, you did well. Oh really? No, you did terribly. Idiot, I whispered, seeing the rabbit's amused smile. Next time I'll do better, you'll see. Belle just smiled upon hearing those words. He too would eagerly await the moment when they would go out together to deliver orders again. Shall we go back to the cafeteria? Belle asked. Obviously, I still need to practice with that strawberry cake. As was obvious, Lyra had continued practicing with the cakes in recent days, cakes that turned out better every day. It wouldn't be long before those cakes were also being sold to customers. Okay, then let's go. So they both decided to return to the cafeteria and continue working. But before they could start walking, something, or rather some people, stopped them. Oh. But it's Lyra. The hobbit and the rabbit looked up when they heard a voice above and saw 4 people on a rooftop. Lyra recognized them instantly. Girls, the hobbit whispered when she saw her friends. They were allies, Kagaya, Nise and Rihanna. Upon seeing their friend, they decided to climb down from the roof and greet her. Lyra's family, it's best to let them talk for a bit, Belle thought, taking a step back so they could talk quietly. Wow, I think this is the first time I've seen you working since you started, Ally said with a cheerful smile at the sight. Well, you see, working is my passion, he said with a sarcastic smile. What a hard-working girl, Rihanna smiled, playing along with the hobbit. Too much, I would say. I am so hardworking that I myself helped God create the world in 7 days, and it took me 7 days because it took 6 days for the material to arrive, so you see. Belle just smiled when he heard that. It seems she shows that playful side to everyone, she thought with amusement, watching her smile at her friends. She definitely misses patrolling. By the way, what are you doing? Nise asked curiously. I thought you worked at the cafeteria. I'm working as a delivery driver, very nice, she replied simply. It's the first time I've done this, and I must say it's a welcome break from the typical routine of the last few weeks. Haha, I'm glad you're putting in the effort, Lyra, Ally said proudly, then looked at the albino. By the way. Oh, that's right, Lyra approached Belle and pointed at him. You already know him, but I'll introduce you. This is Belle, my great coworker. Hi Belle greeted with a nervous smile because of how I introduced him. So you're the one who's been taking care of Lyra all these days. Thank you. The Redeed said gratefully, taking the albino's hand and moving it from side to side. Take care of me? Ha, yeah right, Lyra laughed sarcastically. It must be tiring having a stressed out Lyra by your side all day, Nee said sympathetically to the rabbit. Not at all, in fact it's very nice to have him work with me, it's fun. Belle smiled sincerely as he said those words. Hey idiot, don't talk like that, Lyra said nervously, seeing Rihanna wink at her mischievously. The hobbit just glared at her, and Rihanna tried to stifle her laughter. I'm glad Lyra has a partner like you. She can be quite sarcastic, but she's a good girl, Ally smiled proudly. If she ever misbehaves, don't hesitate to tell us. Understood. Oh come on, don't treat me like I'm a child, the hobbit complained irritably. It's just a joke, Lyra, Hahanese laughed, missing talking to her friend like that. Lately, Lyra hadn't been communicating much with her family because she always left the office early and arrived late, barely exchanging words with them at dinner because she was more sleepy than hungry. And on Sundays, which were days of rest, he would always go out to explore the dungeon to blow things up, explorations that were always joined by a certain cheerful rabbit. That was the reason why he didn't talk to them much anymore, but that didn't mean their friendship had faded. It was still the same as always. By the way, what's with that hat? Rihanna asked curiously. Oh, this, she said, taking off her cap. It's my work uniform. I have to wear it every time I go out as a delivery driver. Really? Amazing. Allies exclaimed, taking the cap and looking at it. I'd love for everyone in the family to have uniforms like warriors of justice, all dressed the same. That would be incredible. No, I'm fine with my clothes, Nee said, feeling uncomfortable in other types of clothing. I agree, Rihanna chimed in. Ah, you're all such spoilsports, Allies complained, handing the cap back to Lyra. I object too, laughed the hobbit, putting her cap back on. Although I must admit it's comfortable to wear. I can get used to it. You look pathetic. Although at this point Kagaya spoke, capturing everyone's attention, seeing how she had a mocking smile looking at Lyra. Belle just frowned when he heard what she said. What? Lyra said, knowing that Kagaya was about to launch into her classic insults and taunts. You look pathetic in that hat, even though it's perfect for you. You're finally where you belong, she said, letting out a soft laugh. Washing dishes and working as a delivery girl, it suits you perfectly, to be honest. It's kind of pathetic, but you deserve it for the stupid things you do. The hobbit just rolled her eyes when she heard that, since it was normal for Kagaya to make those kinds of comments all the time. The one she insulted the most was Ryu, which was why they were always fighting. The patrols have been quiet since you left, it seems you found your place as a maid, she finished speaking, letting out a soft giggle. And there she is again, if it wasn't Lyra then she would make fun of Lion, Rihanna thought wearily. The girls he argued with the most were Lyra and Ryu. It was almost normal for them to always be throwing insults at each other. The one he fought with the least was Knees. For some strange reason, he never made those kinds of comments to the wolf. Kagaya, you don't say that, Ally scolded her friend for her teasing. Why? I'm just telling the truth, he said, looking at Lyra with the same expression. She just let out a tired sigh, preparing to answer him, although the truth was she just wanted to ignore him. But before he could say anything, someone else spoke first. Pathetic. I think you're the pathetic one here. The girls fell silent upon hearing someone else speak, looking with surprise at the one who said those words, Belle, who had an unfriendly expression. Lyra had an expression of even more surprise at what her companion said. What? Kagaya whispered as a vein popped out on her forehead. You're pathetic, she repeated without any fear. Rihanna whispered the sound of surprise as an amused smile appeared on her face. Are you serious? You're making fun of Lyra just because she's working? You must be a pathetic, attention-seeking person to make fun of someone for that, she said as more veins popped out on the Asian girl's forehead. You look like an immature child acting like that. Lyra had just remained silent, staring in surprise at the albino. She didn't know why, but hearing him speak that way was something she hadn't expected. She always saw him as a kind and joking boy, but now, the words he was saying and his expression. It was reminding him of his witch of a boss. Oh no, Knees thought, watching Kagaya tremble slightly as her hair covered her eyes. And Allies just smiled with amusement, as did Rihanna upon witnessing that. At least Lyra works every day, unlike you who probably only pretends to uphold justice, but is really just looking for a way to make fun of someone. A starving stray dog has more justice than you. As he said these words, Belle leaned forward slightly and smiled at him. Or what? Am I wrong? An Asian with a lack of attention. I would give anything to have Lion here, Rihanna thought, watching Kagaya seethe with anger. And that smile from the albino was the last straw. You damned wretch. Kagaya was about to lunge with her katana to cut him in two, and Belle, still smiling, raised his palm to defend himself. Goes. But before she could say anything else, Knees hugged Kagaya tightly from behind, preventing her from attacking. Quick. Get out of here. I don't know how much longer I can hold her back. Knees shouted, trying to tame the beast. Let me go, Knees. I'm going to kill that bastard. Quick, run away. Allies shouted with amusement. Kagaya hates being told the truth. Shut up, allies. What are you waiting for? Run away, Rihanna told them, holding back her laughter. Let's go, rabbit. And without saying a word, the hobbit took the albino by the hand and began to flee with an amused smile at the reaction of her oriental friend. While Kagaya paced back and forth in despair as she watched them escape, Knees, thanks to her great strength, was able to hold her back as long as possible until they disappeared. Haha, Lyra's partner is a funny guy, Rihanna laughed, remembering what she said. Let me go, Knees. You need to calm down. I think this is the first time I've seen someone other than Lion throw insults back at Kagaya, Ally said with amusement. Lyra doesn't seem to get bored in that cafe very often. Maybe I'll go and pay her a visit one of these days. Calm down, Kagaya. Let me go. While the girls were trying to control the beast, Belle and Lyra were already far away from that place. They ran and ran until they stopped on a somewhat deserted street near the cafeteria. Ah ha ha. And the moment they stopped, Lyra began to laugh loudly, much to Belle's confusion. Ha ha ha. I haven't seen Kagaya this hurt since Lion beat her 5 poker games in a row. Ha ha ha. The hobbit continued laughing, a laugh that was contagious to Belle, who just smiled. Seeing her happy took away the bad mood that Asian woman had caused him. I don't understand. Aren't you angry about what he said to you? He asked, confused but still smiling. Haha, not at all. I know that silly girl and her personality. She's rather peculiar, she replied, wiping away a tear. She's always done it this way, so there was no need for you to intervene. Oh. Well, I'm sorry, he apologized, a little nervous about what he had done. But she couldn't help it. She simply didn't like that oriental woman talking about the hobbit like that, and she had simply insulted her without realizing it. But. Belle, hearing Lyra speak again, turned to look at her. She only leaned forward slightly, and a faint but cheerful smile appeared on her face. Although it wasn't necessary, thank you, she said, smiling, putting her hands behind her back. Thank you for defending me from that evil Asian woman, Belle was speechless again when he saw the hobbit smile at him like that. Without being able to control it, his heart began to beat a little faster. It was something that happened every time he saw her smile. Why, you're welcome, she whispered, scratching her cheek. Haha, but it was still incredible. I never expected you to say all those things to him. I didn't know that side of you. You had it very well hidden, she said mockingly, approaching him and giving him a light tap on the shoulder. It's not a side of me I show very often, I explain, starting to walk beside her toward the cafeteria. Seeing my mom act like that when I was little, well. So you did inherit some of that personality after all, interesting, he said, bringing his hand to his chin. What else are you hiding? When you started at the cafeteria, I would deliberately dirty the dishes just to make you work. Aha. I knew it. I shouted, wanting to hit him, but he dodged while laughing. Stop moving. Can't you see I'm trying to hit you? Wait, Lyra. It was only the first few days. I don't care about that. Even though she was following him because she was angry, she was smiling with amusement. That day had been more different for the hobbit than she had imagined. You all stop playing around and get to work. The one who shouted those words was Hestia at the entrance of the cafeteria. Neither of them realized that they were already in front of their workplace. You got lucky this time, said the hobbit with an amused smile. Sorry. So they both walked back to the cafeteria to continue working and finish the day. But before entering, Lyra stopped, looking at the albino's back. Hey Belle. And I call him. Answering the question you asked me a while ago, yes, I admit that at first it was annoying to work in this place, but. She smiled again, but this time it was a different smile, a warmer smile. I guess it's not so bad working here with you, it's fun. Little by little, the hobbit's heart softened and she grew fond of that place, that annoying cafeteria. Or perhaps what he was growing fond of was something or someone else. Let's keep working, Belle, he said, giving him a light tap on the chest, still smiling, and went into the cafeteria, leaving the albino standing at the entrance. He just scratched his cheek, blushing slightly, although he was startled to see his mother standing next to him. Why are you blushing? Althea asked, narrowing her eyes. And nothing, I have to work. And so Belle quickly entered the cafeteria under the watchful eye of Althea, who soon turned her gaze towards Lyra, who was chatting with Hestia. His brow furrowed slightly when he saw her. Lyra felt a chill as she turned her gaze towards her, but Althea was no longer looking at her. She was already walking towards her office. Then he turned his gaze towards Belle, who was already arranging the cakes they would sell that day. Seeing him made that shiver disappear and I smiled to continue working. The days in that cafe were becoming increasingly lively for her. And that would probably continue to change. End of chapter. Chapter 5. I'm here. The doors to the Estrie family room were opened, catching the attention of the girls who were gathered there. They recognized the voice. It was that of their good joking hobbit. It was midday, but as they remembered, the hobbit had said that they would be closing the cafe early that day. He was probably very happy. Welcome Ly. Estrie and the others stopped greeting each other when they saw the explosive girl. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He was the same as always. What was strange was the albino boy who was behind her with a small smile. Lyra had brought a boy to the headquarters. Finally home, Lyra sighed in relief. A strong tick appeared on Kagaya's face when she saw that boy who insulted her a few days ago in the street. What's that guy doing here? Kagaya asked, hatred in her voice. Wow, this is a surprise, Estrie whispered, still a little surprised. Excuse me for intruding, Belle apologized, bowing slightly to them. I invited Belle to headquarters, Lyra explained. Well, more accurately, I invited him to my bomb-making workshop, I hope you don't mind, Estrie-sama. Ooh-oh. The girls let out a sound of surprise upon hearing what the hobbit had said. Not at all, it doesn't bother me, Estrie quickly denied. TSK, but I did, Kagaya said angrily. Why did you invite that wretch? Kagaya, that's no way to address someone, Estrie scolded. Don't worry, Oriental girl, I didn't come to see you, said Belle, still smiling, making the veins on her forehead stand out. Ha ha ha. And Rayana's laughter only served to upset her more. I'll be in my workshop with Belle, and don't worry, Estrie-sama, I already had lunch at the cafeteria, he informed her, then looked at the rabbit and smiled happily. Come on, Belle, you'll be amazed when you see my incredible workshop. Well, surprise me, he said, also smiling. Thus, both young men left the room, leaving the rest in silence, still surprised by what they had seen. They all turned to look at each other, except for Kagaya, who was still irritated by the presence of that guy, remembering the insults from that day. Lyra brought a boy home. They all whispered at once, unable to believe it. They expected it from any girl in the family, even from Kagaya or Selti, but her. From Lyra. Wow, this was something I didn't expect, Estrie said, smiling tenderly. It seems Lyra is really starting to enjoy this job. Lately I had seen her going to work in the mornings much more cheerful, and I was beginning to understand the reason. The way I look at him when I invite him to his workshop. She was a goddess thousands of years old, she knew even the smallest expression. Who would have thought it? Iska laughed, looking around at the place where they had gone. Bringing a boy to headquarters without consulting us first. This is an unusual event, allies whispered, nodding slightly. Lyra is changing. How daring, Rayana smiled amusedly. I don't see anything strange about it, Ryu said, confused. That boy is Lyra's friend, and according to her, he's also interested in bomb-related topics. They're just good friends. Lion, you're still too young to understand adult topics, said Asta, patting her on the head. But you're only a year older than me, I whispered with an anime-style sweat drop. Don't you understand, Lion? Lyra brought a boy to headquarters. A boy. Allies exclaimed. She has plenty of male friends, and none of them have invited him, even though many of them share her taste for bombs well, only because they sell gunpowder. But she invited him. There must be a hidden message somewhere, Nise whispered, a hand on his chin. Ahahaha, Estrie let out a laugh when she saw what Lyra had done by inviting a boy to her house, although she had to admit that she was also surprised. That wretched TSK, Kagaya clicked her tongue in annoyance. Even if she didn't say it, those insults towards her hit her hard, curious, since she threw those same words at people without caring whether it affected them or not. Now she could feel what other people felt with hurtful words. Do you think they're secretly dating? Asked innocent Selti, a little embarrassed. Nah, it's still too soon for that, Rayana denied. But it's very likely to happen soon. This is getting more and more interesting, whispered allies with great excitement. I still say you guys are exaggerating, Ryu said. Shut up, Lion, and eat your vegetables, Asta ordered, making the elf frown. In the end, I think that job is changing her, Nise whispered with a proud smile. Lately, her terrorist side was coming out of her body, and that made Nise proud. She knew her friend could change. Since Lyra isn't going to lunch, can I eat her portion? Maryu asked shyly. What? She said nervously when she saw that everyone was looking at her. Sometimes I wonder, where does all that food you eat go? You don't gain weight even though you're a complete glutton, Rihanna whispered, her eyes narrowed. It's more than obvious where she's going. To those tremendous tits she's got. Allies shouted, grabbing Mariu's breasts and starting to move them from side to side. Damn. They're big. Hey allies, stop doing that. Shouted the human, red with embarrassment, while the others laughed, except for Astri, who just smiled, and Ryu scolded her, saying that it was very bold. I hope Lyra enjoys the afternoon with her friend, the goddess thought, looking around at the place where they had gone. Perhaps I'll bring them some snacks later. And with those thoughts, lunch continued in a lively manner in the dining room. A lively lunch like all the others. Holler to Lyra. Welcome to my empire. Exclaimed Lyra, opening the door to her workshop and welcoming her guest. Wow. And that was all the rabbit could say the moment he set foot in that place, the smell of gunpowder reaching him. Ha. Lyra smiled proudly at the reaction she had. I had been working at that cafe for over a month, and that month was more than enough for me to form a good friendship with the albino and become friends. Although they started off on the wrong foot with Lyra just insulting him, that changed completely. They gradually got to know each other, and their shared interest in bombs made their friendship quickly take things to the next level. Their friendship had progressed so much that Lyra finally dared to invite him to her workshop, something surprising since she didn't even let her friends into that sacred place. The only one she let in was Asta, who always helped her carry the things she bought, and obviously her goddess, who sometimes brought her food when she spent a lot of time locked up. And now Belle has also entered her list, her new and curious friend. I must admit I wasn't expecting this, Belle whispered. Given the Hobbit's personality, I expected that place to be a complete disaster, but it wasn't. To her surprise, everything was well organized. The shelves full of gunpowder sacks were neatly arranged at the back of the workshop, and to one side was a ladder so Lyra could reach the sacks from above. He also had a trunk that was full of threads which he probably used as wicks. On other shelves there were all kinds of materials for assembling bombs, and in another corner there were other trunks, but these contained bombs already made inside. I honestly expected everything to be a mess, but everything is amazing, it's crazy, I praised as I started walking around. Haha, thanks. Lyra looked away, a little embarrassed. The truth is that his workshop was indeed messy, not terribly so, but it was definitely disorganized. Last night he did a big cleaning of the place for today. He wanted to impress Belle with his workshop. I didn't know why I wanted to impress him. It was silly to do that, but I wanted to see his reaction to seeing his sacred temple. And in the end he got what he wanted, an expression full of astonishment on his part. And the praise, he had to admit that it made her happy. Come on, calm down, she thought, patting her cheeks. Wow. You have sacks with different types of gunpowder, commented the rabbit. Oh. Of course. Every bag of gunpowder is different. She was excited to talk to him about bombs. For the first time, she had a close friend with the same interests. In fact, I had wanted to invite him to my workshop for a few days, but I was too shy to do it, but in the end I finally decided to do it. And now that she was in his workshop, she would begin to speak excitedly about every detail. Her friends would fall asleep when she tried to explain something to them. But Belle. I could see the emotion in her eyes. There was no doubt whatsoever. He was just another friend. The color of the bag indicates the danger of the gunpowder, he began to explain as he put on some glasses he took from Celti. Wow, I had no idea there were all kinds of gunpowder, Belle whispered in amazement. Which is the deadliest? Oh, asked about the most dangerous thing, I like it, she said with amusement, walking towards a drawer. I have it stored here. From the drawer he took out a slightly larger bag from his hand which contained purple gunpowder. I present to you the most lethal gunpowder I have so far, the DESTROYER 3000, she said proudly. That's an amazing name. I exclaimed excitedly, grabbing the bag. But isn't it a small amount? You get large sacks of the other types of gunpowder. That's the problem, my silly friend, she said, shaking her head in disappointment. This gunpowder is very difficult to obtain, and they sell it in small portions, plus the price is ridiculously high. Wow, I don't even want to imagine how lethal this is. Yes, it's so lethal that it's very difficult to buy it legally, so with all the sorrow in my heart, I had to buy it illegally in Rivera, she said, lowering her gaze and feigning sadness. And you're supposed to be from the Justice family. But I bought it for a good cause. To help civilians. You helped so much that you destroyed my mother's coffee shop. Ugh, the hobbit groaned in pain. Silly rabbit, don't remind me of that. Ow. He groaned as Lyra kicked him while she picked up the gunpowder and put it away again. Hey, do you have a bomb made with that gunpowder? A smile appeared on the hobbit's face upon hearing that question. Wow, I'm so glad you asked that question, she said excitedly. Come on, follow me. They both walked through the workshop with Belle smiling as he watched Lyra talking to him about what she was passionate about. She looked beautiful with that smile. Observe. Upon reaching a table, Lyra removed a blanket covering an object, which turned out to be a dark-colored bomb, which had a stand to prevent it from falling. Wow, it even has a painted skull, Belle said in amazement, and Lyra continued smiling proudly. Does it have a name? Of course it has a name, it's called the Iranian alarm clock. What a curious name, I whispered with an anime-style sweat drop. Hahaha. And Lyra just laughed at her friend's reaction. A month ago I never imagined that I would be like this with him, having a good time. At first I thought he was hateful, but I had to admit I was wrong. It was fun being with him, both in the workshop and in the cafeteria. It's a very lethal bomb, so lethal that I've only managed to manufacture one, he began to explain while looking intently at the bomb. How lethal? Enough to devastate an area twice the size of the Plaza of Babel. Wow, Belle could only manage a surprised sound at that fact. And your friends don't mind you having something like that in the workshop. They got used to it over time. That's scary, but it's incredible. He exclaimed excitedly. Hee hee. At last. Finally, there was someone as crazy as her in her love of bombs. It was nice to have someone like that around. Hey, do you want to create a bomb from scratch? The Hobbit asked excitedly, putting the cover back on the Iranian alarm clock. Can I? Of course you can. You said you've made bombs before. Well yes, but it was a long time ago, I've probably lost my touch, he explained, embarrassed. No problem. I'll guide you if you don't know something, so don't worry. I really wanted to be making bombs with him. She never thought about it, but she was having more fun with him than she had with her friends in a long time. She loved them but they were boring. They didn't have the same sense of fun as she did. But that rabbit standing in front of her knew what was up with life. Come on, let's create a D-rank bomb, they're the least lethal, it's a good start, she said, walking towards a bookshelf, and Belle followed her. She's cute, Belle thought, watching Lyra smile and listening to her heartbeat. Ugh, come on Belle, concentrate. Why am I acting like this? Lyra thought, realizing she hadn't stopped smiling since entering the workshop. Why do I feel so happy? Although she wanted to avoid it, she was already beginning to feel ashamed of it. Since Belle defended her from Kagaya, she had become much closer to him. She felt comfortable by his side with someone who understood her jokes. She didn't know when she went from hating the cafeteria to starting to like it, waking up in the morning excited to know what new crazy thing she would do next to that rabbit. Without meaning to, she heeded Iska's advice about getting used to working there so that she would be fired. The difference was that she didn't want to be fired yet. Go on, take the sack of gunpowder up there and take it to the work table, we're going to make some bombs. As you wish, boss, Belle obeyed, took the top height coat and walked to her workplace. It had been many years since I had created a bomb, but with Lyra as my teacher, I was confident I would do well. I couldn't help but get excited about it. Are you ready? Lyra asked, still smiling, as she arrived with a few pieces. Whenever you want. Okay, then let's begin. And so they both began making bombs, their eyes showing excitement as they worked and talked about the subject. They really felt comfortable working together. But that day would end in an unexpected way. 3 hours later. Astri, with a beautiful smile on her face, placed a plate with a few sandwiches on a tray. They were for his terrorist daughter and her rabbit friend. And sitting in some kitchen chairs were allies, Iska and Rihanna watching their goddess while they chatted. Lyra has been locked in the workshop with her friend for 3 hours now, allies whispered, her eyes squinting. Suspicious, Iska said, tapping her chin with a finger. Nah, it's Lyra, Rihanna said dismissively. She says she likes making bombs, and as bomb geeks, that's probably all they're talking about. Maybe, allies agreed, nodding slowly. But there's something I'm very curious to see, and I'm sure Iska agrees with me. I'm curious to see it too, the Amazon laughed with a bit of excitement. What do you mean? What do you want to see? Rihanna asked, confused. Allies and Iska turned to look at each other, then smiled and gave their answer. Lyra in love, they said at the same time, making Astri let out a slight laugh as she listened to the conversation. Is Lyra in love? Yes. Exclaimed the Amazon with excitement. That's ridiculous. A Lyra in love. That doesn't exist, Rihanna said, shaking her head slightly. That's like saying allies will stop being narcissistic, that's impossible. I'm not a narcissist, I'm the most humble woman in the world, said the retweet in a proud and arrogant tone. Yeah, right. I know it seems almost impossible, but don't you find the idea of Lyra in love exciting? Iska asked Rihanna. Well, I don't deny it, but it's more than obvious that it's impossible. Lyra is obsessed with bombs, so it's impossible for something like romantic love to exist in that evil heart of hers, Rihanna said, standing firm in her opinion on the matter. Dreaming costs nothing, whispered the Amazon, letting her face fall onto the table in front of her. The perfect butt is more likely to get a boyfriend, Ally said with amusement. Who has the perfect butt? Lion. Ah. Astrid couldn't help but laugh as she listened to the strange conversation of her three daughters. It was always fun to see them interact. It would be best to go give this to Lyra, she and her friend are surely hungry. So, taking the tray with the sandwiches, she left the kitchen, leaving her daughters to continue chatting. If Mariu has perfect breasts, then Lion has a perfect butt, Allies opined. And who has the perfect legs? Iska asked. Noin has very nice and squeezable legs, but Kagaya isn't far behind either. Difficult decision. Astri Sama has everything in one, Rihanna whispered, and her two friends agreed. Yes, a very normal and healthy chat between the three of us. As Astri continued walking through the corridors with a smile towards her daughter's workshop. She was happy that the Hobbit had gotten used to that cafe. Perhaps the first few weeks were hell for her, but little by little that changed. And for some reason I felt that this new friend had a lot to do with it. They make a lovely friendship, really thought Astri, letting out a small laugh. I was curious to see how far all that would go. Although, like allies Iska and Rihanna, she was curious to see Lyra in love, she knew that was impossible for the time being. It was unlikely that someone like Lyra would fall in love, but she didn't rule out the possibility. Perhaps in the future we can see that side of her. And with those thoughts Astri arrived at the Hobbit's workshop and opened the door expecting to find a disaster as always, only this time with two bomb-crazy people. Lyra, I brought some sandwiches for you and your friend. Astri's words were suddenly cut off the moment she entered the workshop. Her eyes opened in surprise, unable to believe what she was seeing. It was something I never imagined. They were both leaning on the table where they made bombs, but instead of making bombs they were doing something else. Belle was kissing Lyra's cheek, who had an expression of total shock at what was happening, with a slight blush noticeable on her cheeks. That was a scene Astri never expected to see, a scene she wanted to keep watching, but the albino quickly stopped kissing the Hobbit's cheek the moment she entered. Oh sorry, I'll come back later, carry on with what you were doing. Unable to suppress a slight smile, Astri quickly turned around and left the workshop, leaving them both alone. Lyra still in shock and Belle, whose face was slowly beginning to turn red. Slowly, like a robot, Lyra turned to look at Belle, still perplexed and with a blush on her cheeks. Belle. What did you just do? I whispered, not believing that it just happened. Her heart started beating 1,000 miles an hour as she processed things. Hahaha. All Belle could do was laugh nervously, looking around trying to hide his enormous embarrassment. Look at the time. It's so late. She exclaimed, quickly standing up. I have to go now, I have to bake some cakes, hahaha. Lyra did not respond, she just continued to stare at him in bewilderment. And Belle's white face was now completely red, wanting to flee quickly from there. It was very nice making bombs with you, but I'm leaving now. I remember the way perfectly, so you don't need to guide me. Goodbye. And without waiting for an answer, Belle quickly left the workshop, closing the door and leaving Lyra alone. The place, which had been filled with laughter and jokes for 3 hours, was now in total silence, the only sound being the rapid beating of his heart. Her cheeks were still flushed as she remembered what had happened, still unable to believe it. Slowly, she raised her hand and brought it to her cheek and whispered a few words. He kissed me, I whispered, unable to believe it. Things were going to be very different for both of you from now on. End of chapter. Chapter 6. Another day began in the city of Arario, another very productive day for everyone. It was a day that looked like it would be a quiet one, without any problems. But things were not the same in a certain cafe. Things between two teenagers. There was a very uncomfortable atmosphere in that place. As usual, the cafeteria was doing its thing like every day, only this time things were a little different. Elle was quietly baking cakes. And Lyra washed the dishes in silence. They had been like that since the beginning of the day. The usual laughter and jokes that they used to share while working were no longer heard. Now there was only a deep silence, something the little goddess noticed as she watched them from the door that connected to the kitchen. Something strange is going on here, Hestia thought, her eyes squinting. Since the beginning of the day, neither of them had spoken to each other. Lyra arrived at the cafeteria and didn't turn around to look at or greet Belle. And the albino did the same, ignoring her. For a moment Hestia thought they were fighting or something, but seeing the blushes on their faces, she knew that wasn't the case. Something else had happened, something much bigger. Suspicious, thought the goddess. Somewhat hesitantly, Lyra turned around to look at Belle, and he, as if they were synchronized, did the same. Their eyes met for a few short seconds before they quickly looked away, embarrassed, and went back to what they were doing. Their hearts were beating rapidly. Why did he kiss me? the hobbit thought, trying hard to keep her face from turning red. Why did I kiss her? Thought Belle, who couldn't control his embarrassment, which was clearly visible on his face. The memory of what happened yesterday in the workshop came back to them. That unexpected moment. Flashback. So you put this here so the gunpowder doesn't ignite when you're assembling the bomb. Just. The hobbit was giving Belle instructions on how to perfectly assemble the bomb. They had been doing this for about an hour full of jokes and laughter between them. But just as the bomb was about to finish, Belle stopped paying attention to Lyra's instructions and just stared at her. The hobbit didn't notice because she was focused on giving the directions with a slight smile, showing that she was happy. Belle was lost in that smile. Now, once you have the bomb assembled, you have to add the rest of the gunpowder, but it has to be done precisely, otherwise it could get ruined, she continued, unaware of how her friend was looking at her. Belle knew it. From the very first moment he realized. He liked Lyra, he had fallen in love with her. It wasn't love at first sight, since at first he just found it funny to see how scared her mom was. But it was when he worked with her on the first day that he fell in love. Her sarcastic, joking, and direct personality caught his attention. It made her seem like a unique and interesting girl. But it wasn't until he saw her smile that day when he prepared a cake for the first time that he was completely smitten. Belle, I did it. The moment he saw her smiling so happily about creating a cake, he found her extremely cute. And that feeling only continued to grow within him the more time he spent by her side. He was aware that he was slowly falling in love with her, but he didn't care. He simply let that feeling continue to grow inside him. And now he was there, staring at Lyra who was still explaining things to him about the bombs. I couldn't hear her anymore. He had only lost his way with his face. And when he realized it. His lips were already kissing the hobbit's cheek, who opened her eyes in surprise at what he did, stopping her explanation. He didn't know why he did it, but something inside him wanted to kiss her cheek. An impulse he couldn't control. Kiss that soft cheek. And the rest is history. As Tree entered the workshop, Belle got nervous and ran away. At that moment she knew that their good friendship would never be the same. And he was not wrong. End of flashback. And that brings us to the present day, with both of them silent, not knowing how to act after what happened. Lyra was very confused, not understanding why Belle did that. Well, part of her had an idea but didn't want to believe it. It was impossible. This is very uncomfortable, thought Belle, looking for a way to get rid of it all. Fortunately, the perfect excuse arrived. Hey, Hestia said, re-entering the kitchen with 2 boxes of cakes in her hands. Someone ordered these 2 cakes, so I was wondering if you could deliver them together. No. I'll do it myself. Belle jumped towards Hestia, grabbing the 2 cakes before the hobbit could say anything. I'll be back later. Goodbye. And without waiting, Belle ran out of the cafeteria, leaving them both alone in the kitchen. She had a lot on her mind, so the best thing to do was to go outside and clear her head. Lyra sighed as Belle left, taking the tension and discomfort with him. Silly, thought the hobbit, slightly blushing. What's happening? Lyra jumped a little in fright at Hestia's voice. She thought she had already returned to the counter. What's wrong? She asked nervously, looking away. What's going on between you and Belle? I asked, narrowing my eyes. You've both been acting really strange since this morning. Hestia was a very curious person and she wouldn't leave until she got an explanation of the matter. And nothing's wrong, I stammered, looking away. It wasn't normal for Lyra to act so nervous and embarrassed, but she couldn't help it. It was the first time something like this had happened to him. The first time a boy showed her affection, and not just with any action. But the kiss on the cheek, their first kiss. I didn't know how to react to that. Is nothing wrong? They've both been blushing every 2 minutes whenever their eyes meet. The sexual tension is palpable. Sexual tension. Stop talking nonsense, you failed goddess. She yelled, red-faced to the ears. Goddess Fra fine, I'm not going to get upset, Hestia sighed heavily to calm herself. I was there to investigate, not to fight. Besides, shouldn't she be on display instead of standing here meddling? Lyra asked suspiciously. I think you should already know that at this hour we hardly have any customers. We can chat as much as we want without anyone bothering us. We hardly ever have customers, just that Amazon who comes to pick up Belle every day, Lyra whispered irritably. Ooh, what is that? Jealousy? Hestia asked with amusement, much to the hobbit's annoyance. She's not going to leave until I tell her everything, is she? He said wearily. Exactly. We're co-workers, so tell me what happened, she said, excited to hear the gossip. The hobbit just sighed, walking over to a chair and sitting down. You could see in her eyes the shame of talking about that subject. Fortunately, her goddess didn't tell the other girls anything, as they would surely have bombarded her with questions. The only thing that happened in the morning was that Astri smiled at him with amusement while giving him a thumbs up. He had surely already imagined many strange stories. Tell us, Hestia pleaded, eager to know everything. Well Belle Belcon kissed you? Shhh. Lower your voice, you idiot goddess. Or do you want the boss to hear us? Lyra asked angrily, hoping Althea hadn't heard her. If listening would mean the end for him and he still had many dreams to fulfill, well no, but he still wanted to keep creating bombs. Sorry, she apologized, covering her mouth. But Belle. Hestia was in shock. She never thought the rabbit would make such a risky move. Yes, that idiot kissed me out of nowhere, she whispered, looking away in embarrassment. Just remembering that moment made her cheeks blush. It was the first time that had happened to him. Her friends would surely be making fun of her for acting that way. I can't believe it, Hestia whispered, still surprised. Belcon is so bold. And how was it? Was it on the lips? With the tongue? No. Lyra quickly denied it, trying to control her embarrassment. And no, it wasn't on the lips, it was a kiss on the cheek, you perverted goddess. The French kiss. She didn't want to be like Ryu, but that would be too much for her. On the cheek. How cute. Hestia exclaimed with excitement at the mere thought of the scene, imagining Lyra and Belle's expressions at that moment. He's a complete fool, said the hobbit, dropping her head onto the table. How could he come up with something like that out of nowhere? Well, it's more than obvious, it's because he likes it. Don't say it. Before Hestia could finish those words, Lyra interrupted her. I didn't finish those words, she whispered, embarrassed and nervous. She didn't want to hear that. She didn't feel ready. Why not? Asked a curious little goddess, wanting to help with the matter. I know you're clever, Lyra. You know exactly what Belle's actions mean. You know very well that Belle is in love with you. Ugh. Lyra's ears began to smoke and she didn't dare to look up. It was more than obvious that she already knew what Belle felt at the moment he kissed her, but she never imagined it. I always act like his cheerful, bomb-crazy friend, and out of nowhere I act that way. I caught her off guard. What will you do now, Lyra? What am I going to do about it? She whispered, embarrassed. You know, what do you think of Belcon's feelings? Do you feel the same way too? For Lyra Belle he was a good friend. She never thought of anything more with him. In fact, she never thought about romance again since the brave man rejected her a few years ago, deciding to focus solely on his bombs. And that thought remained even when he met the rabbit. For her, he was a great friend, nothing more, and she believed it would stay that way. Until now, when he kissed her cheek. I didn't know what to do about it. Well, the truth is that I noticed long before that Belcon was interested in you, commented the little goddess. Oh? And why didn't you tell me? It's not my place to say what other people's feelings are, she replied, looking at the hobbit. The point is, Belcon has been interested in you for a while now. I must admit, he's hidden it very well. That fool. I would say that I didn't care about that and would simply reject it, but I hesitated to do something like that. For some reason I didn't want to reject him, but I also didn't want to accept his feelings. It was so confusing, his heart was racing just remembering that kiss on his cheek, he simply didn't know what to do. Do you like Belcon? I don't know. The albino had definitely put her in a big dilemma. She didn't feel ready for something like that, but she also didn't want to lose her friendship with him since she really enjoyed being by his side. For the first time, she had been mentally checkmated, not knowing what to do. Ah, young people and their love problems, Hestia thought with amusement, watching Lyra's embarrassed expressions. But of one thing I was sure. The following days would be entertaining to watch. Or maybe not. Althea stood with her arms crossed, leaning against the door that led to the kitchen. I had listened to the conversation from beginning to end. The woman said nothing, she just closed her eyes and walked back to her office. Perhaps things between Lyra and Belle would be more difficult than they imagined. The following morning. Great. Today I'm going to wear my pants. These were Belle's words as he stood behind the counter, preparing to start another workday. Maybe I didn't speak to him yesterday and acted like an idiot, but today will be different. He thought, clenching his fist with determination. Yesterday, while walking and delivering orders, he thought things through more carefully and made a decision. He would confess his feelings directly, but wouldn't ask for an answer because it was more than obvious. Lyra saw him as nothing more than a friend. She didn't even stand a chance. Perhaps that discouraged him, but he also didn't want to lose his friendship with her. So, like the man he was, he would speak face to face and make things clear. Sure, that's what he was saying now, but it was very likely that at the time he would draw a blank, not knowing what to say. All he hoped was that his friendship with Lyra wouldn't be harmed by the foolish thing he did, by not being able to control his impulses. It's almost time to open, Lyra will be here soon, I need to talk to her as soon as possible. I didn't want to continue with that awkward atmosphere. I wanted to go back to those moments where they just laughed and joked around. I wanted to get them back. I'm going to clear everything up, she thought firmly, waiting for the hobbit to arrive. 30 minutes later. The cafe had been open for half an hour and Lyra hadn't appeared yet, missing Belle. Why isn't he showing up? Although it might not seem like it, Lyra was a punctual girl, arriving 10 minutes before the cafeteria opened. But half an hour had already passed and there was no sign of her. That really confused the rabbit. Could she have gotten sick? He thought doubtfully, a little worried about his friend. Just when he was about to open up about his feelings, she didn't appear. I had bad luck. Ugh, if mom doesn't show up she's going to be angry. At that moment, Alfea came down the stairs carrying a notebook with a few notes, probably doing the accounts for the business or something like that. She always went down at that time to get a slice of cake. Mom, Belle called out the moment he saw her. What's wrong? Alfea asked calmly as she looked for a slice of cake in the refrigerator. Lyra looks like she's going to be a little late today, so please don't get angry, she said, clasping her hands together, not wanting to be scolded. Perhaps she had a problem at her headquarters and that's why she's delayed. She would save her friend's skin so that she wouldn't receive her mother's wrath. Oh, that, Alfea said, finding the slice of cake and turning to look at Belle, still with the same expression. She's not coming anymore. Why? He asked, puzzled. Because I fired her. What? End of chapter. Chapter 7. The morning was progressing calmly at the headquarters of the Estrie Familia, the place where the most ordinary women of Arario lived. The dining room table was laden with plates of toast, scrambled eggs, hot coffee, and juice prepared by the divine hands of their beautiful goddess. So I jumped on that guy and beat him to a pulp until he paid for his crimes. Then I returned the apple he had stolen. That's when I realized my beautiful being was created to bring justice, Allies exclaimed, recalling that moment. Hahaha. That was a good one. A star replied, laughing, while hitting the table with his hand. It was a very happy morning for the girls who were laughing and enjoying their food. But between the laughter and the food, not one hobbit was laughing. Lyra. She was sitting with her elbows on the table, slowly chewing a piece of jam toast, her eyes vacant, staring into space. It definitely wasn't normal for the family's Jocasta hobbit to be so quiet. The girls began to notice the strange atmosphere, realizing it was coming from Lyra. Hey, is something wrong with Lyra? Rihanna asked quietly. Why does she look like all her bombs went wrong? Isn't that his normal face? Nguyen replied mockingly. No, her normal face is one of sarcasm, not silent depression, Iska added. I'm strange. I should be happy, shouldn't I? Mariu said, puzzled. Yes, in the end she got what she wanted so much, Nise commented while drinking her coffee. What do you mean? Asked Ryu, who had been eating in silence, not understanding the situation. Didn't you know? Rihanna said, leaning towards her. Lyra got fired from that coffee shop where she worked with the rabbit. The hobbit frowned slightly upon hearing what her friend said. Did they fire her? Ryu opened her eyes in surprise, as she knew nothing about it since she had gone to sleep early. After that, he looked at Lyra, who still had the same expression, staring into space. But she always said she hated him, that she was fed up, that she wanted to be fired so she could dedicate more time to her bombs, said the elf, not understanding why her friend had a long face. Exactly. Several agreed in unison. He always said so. They all turned to look at Lyra, still there, with the cold bread between her teeth, her eyes dull and her legs hanging motionless. Hey Lyra. Allies called as she approached with a smile. Weren't you supposed to dance for joy when you got fired? Weren't you going to shout finally free from that cursed kitchen? And symbolically set fire to your uniform? He asked with amusement. Yes, Lyra murmured, barely audible, remembering how she used to shout that. So why do you have that abandoned hobbit face? Kagaya asked mockingly, though surprisingly he didn't return the mockery. She just let out a sigh. Because she whispered softly, lowering her head even further. I didn't think it would hurt. There was a brief silence. Oh? It was the sound they all let out, bewildered. Does it hurt? What? Nise asked, confused. Meanwhile, the goddess Estrie just sat eating in silence with a smile, already understanding the reason for the hobbit's attitude. It doesn't make sense. Iska shouted. You wanted to get out of there from day one. You said you hated the kitchen and all the dishes to wash, that the boss was a silent lunatic, that the uniform was uncomfortable, and that rabbit talked too much, Nguyen listed, counting on her fingers. And now it turns out you miss all that. Asta exclaimed. Not all of that. Lyra cried, jerking her head up, her face completely red. Just. What for? Most of them asked, squinting. The cakes. Yes. She quickly came up with. I loved experimenting in the kitchen. It was my secret laboratory. They all looked at her with narrowed eyes. Could it be that you miss a certain person? Allies asked, starting to smile with amusement, and Astrid let out a little laugh, knowing she had been discovered. Huh? Me? Miss Bell? Of course not, ha 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 ha. Lyra laughed falsely while sweating as if she had a fever. We never said it was Bell, Rihanna said, smiling mischievously. Lyra started sweating more, knowing that she was talking too much. She misses him a lot, Iska began to say in a sing-song tone. What things they say. Rabbit is silly. Annoying. And he was always changing my name. That's unforgivable. Yes, of course. It was more than obvious that the teasing of Lyra wasn't going to end until they got tired of it. Yes, keep repeating it to yourself, maybe one day you'll believe it, Kagaya whispered in that typical sarcastic tone. That's not it. So why can't you even swallow your toast? Niz asked, raising an eyebrow. Lyra swallowed hard as her whole family watched her as if she were a failed experiment that had suddenly gained human emotions. Lyra's eyes wandered over each of them until they settled on Astrid, who was smiling at her affectionately and maternally. She didn't know why, but that smile gave her the courage to be honest for the first time about what she felt. It's just that, she murmured in a softer voice. When I worked there it was fun. Fun? Yes, she looked down as she played with the crust of the bread. Even though I complained a lot, the truth is I liked being with him. Bell was kind, clumsy, and always laughed at my jokes even when they were bad. So, you like spending time with him? And no, that's not it. He quickly denied. It just made the days lighter, more entertaining. It was like having a talking rabbit as a companion or something like that. That's affection, Lyra. Iska shouted. No. That's mutual appreciation of work. He shouted, pointing dramatically in the air. Yeah, right, and I fell in love with a magic rock once, Asta said sarcastically. Lyra sighed heavily, letting her head fall onto the table. This is a headache. The girls just kept smiling, watching their friend's actions. And it was there that Noin made a comment that could turn everything upside down. You're acting very strange for yourself, Lyra. Did that boy, Noin began, giggling. Did he kiss you or what? She said it clearly in a joking tone, wiggling her eyebrows like someone telling a joke, and the others laughed, waiting for her friend to get angry as usual. But then. Something happened that none of them expected. Lyra blushed. And it wasn't a slight blush. Her cheeks burned as if someone had detonated a bomb of embarrassment in her face. And then the dining room exploded. What? They all shouted, unable to believe it, while Astrid laughed, and Lyra became even more embarrassed to see that she had been discovered. Wait. Did I really kiss you? Iska exclaimed, her eyes bulging out of their sockets as they began to sparkle with excitement. And we didn't know anything. Asta shouted indignantly. Was it on the lips? When did this happen? Allies jumped onto the table, using a spoon as a microphone. Shut up. Lyra shouted, covering her face with both hands. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Or rather, I never wanted you to know. So it was a kiss after all. Kagaya said with a mocking smile. Wow, you and that scoundrel kissed, who would have thought? How long did the kiss last? Iska asked, filled with excitement and wanting to know more. Was it tongue-tied? Selti asked in an inaudible murmur. They all turned to look at her with surprised expressions. She just lowered her gaze and hid behind her cup. Sorry. No. Exclaimed Lyra, her face still red. It was just a kiss on the cheek. They all chanted together, looking tenderly at their friend who could no longer bear the embarrassment. Mariu stroked his head tenderly. That sounds sweet and very nice. And sudden. How did it happen? Rihanna asked with genuine interest. That's it. Tell us everything, you traitorous hobbit. Noin tugged at her sleeve. We were supposed to be the family of beautiful spinsters forever. You're abandoning ship. It was nothing special. Lyra replied, hiding as best she could as if she wanted to die there. Nothing out of the ordinary. They kissed you. And you're sad because you won't see them anymore. Iska shouted. And that means, Nee said with a small smile. You too. They all remained silent. And again. Lyra's face turned red. I don't know. She finally shouted, exploding. I mean, he's an idiot, a scatterbrain, a brute. But he also makes me laugh, and he cooks well, and he helped me with my first cake, and you like it, Asta said bluntly. The others began to chant, as if it were a song. How cute, our little one is in love. Lyra just slumped down on the table, burying her face in it. I hate all of this, she whispered, feeling her face couldn't blush anymore. No. You love him, Allies replied, her eyes sparkling. We have to go find him and ask him if he plans to marry you. Asta shouted excitedly. No. Lyra jumped up in fright. And while the whole dining hall continued celebrating, shouting, and bombarding her with questions and jokes, the hobbit could only think of one thing. Her smile. His clumsiness. And that kiss. What am I supposed to do with all this? she thought, knowing she would never return to the cafeteria. The girls continued whispering, laughing, and some even started talking about what kind of dress would suit her best for the wedding that they said was imminent. But how short she is, a puffy dress would make her look like a muffin, Kagaya said mercilessly. An adorable muffin. Iska added, laughing as she drew a picture on a napkin. Could we set off fireworks she made? Nguyen asked excitedly. Imagine an explosive wedding, literally. There's no wedding, you idiots. Lyra shouted, finally pulling her face up from the table, red as a tomato. She's in the denial phase, Mariu said tenderly, hugging her by the shoulders. Have you rehearsed your idea yet? Asta asked, sipping his coffee. I'm not marrying Belle. She protested desperately. We're not even anything. Still Rihanna whispered with a smile as she played with her fork, making Lyra clench her teeth. Never in her life had she felt so ashamed as she did now. What if you come back? Niz suddenly asked. Go back? To the cafeteria? You're crazy. Lyra replied quickly. Why not? The she-wolf said again in a calm tone. If you like being there, if you like being with him. I can't go back. They fired me. She shouted. And even if they hadn't, after that kiss everything was so weird. He's probably sorry. Or maybe he doesn't even want to see me. My little Lyra with her love doubts, allies thought proudly. Or perhaps a streak began, finally rising from her chair with a serene smile. He misses you too. They all fell silent. Because when their goddess spoke in that tone it was impossible to ignore her. You can't run away forever, Lyra. Sooner or later you're going to have to face what you feel. I'm not running away. I was kicked out. Besides, I don't feel anything for him. She replied, crossing her arms. They all said at the same time, in a tone of disbelief. I'm just saying, Ally said, moving closer to her and hugging her around the neck. You can go to the cafe tomorrow as a customer, that way you'll have a good excuse to see him. I'm not showing up there. He shouted, pushing her away. Sure, they all repeated in that mocking tone. It was becoming normal for them to talk at the same time. And so breakfast continued at headquarters with the girls thinking about how to get Lyra to get close to her rabbit again without it seeming obvious. To make that love continue to grow. They had to act as Cupid even though they knew Lyra wouldn't let them. Even so, it was fun. As the hobbit sighed again, she slumped back down on the table. And once again the image of Belle smiling at him flashed through his mind. Although I don't want to admit it. Even if everything was confusing. I missed more than just the cakes in that place. I missed him. End of chapter. Chapter 8. In a certain coffee shop. Belle was at the counter, elbows resting on the wooden face in his hands. A dull expression covered his face. The cafe was completely empty. Not a single customer. The sound of the wall clock seemed to rumble louder than ever, marking the slow and lazy passage of time. It wasn't unusual for them to be like that at that hour. Mostly, customers started arriving in the afternoon when the sun began to set and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and freshly baked pastries spread through the streets, attracting the attention of adventurers or people leaving work. But now, only silence filled the air. Belle said nothing, but her whole body was filled with despondency. His eyes, lazy and without energy, scanned each of the tables in the place once more. They were clean, tidy, and had a quiet atmosphere. And then, almost without meaning to, the image of Lyra appeared in his mind. Lyra grumbling as she swept, with that characteristic frown and that way of complaining about everything. DSK, why is it always me? He remembered her saying, with a broom in one hand and an expression of annoyance as she swept listlessly. A faint smile appeared on her face, though it quickly faded. Sigh. His eyes drifted down to the counter, right where his elbows rested. That was where she often stood, serving coffee or handing out desserts, cracking a sarcastic joke to a customer, or even to him. We should put chili in their coffee and see what happens. The memory of that provoked a soft, nostalgic laugh in her. Then he peeked out a little further and turned towards the kitchen. That little corner that now seemed cold and lifeless. The place where she spent most of her time, complaining while washing dishes or preparing cakes with that dedication so typical of someone who, although she would not admit it, enjoyed her work. What if we make a cake shaped like a bomb? It's sure to sell fast. And one more memory of her came to his mind. Belle slightly clenched his fists on the wood. I miss her, he whispered, barely audible, his voice muffled. 2 days had passed since Lyra was fired. 2 eternal and cursed days. And since then, I hadn't seen her again. The atmosphere in the cafeteria was different. Everything was still in its place, but it felt different. Empty. As if the essence of what had made that place special had left with her. I missed her voice. His sarcastic laughter. That mocking tone she used with him was just to hide the fact that she actually enjoyed his company. She also missed those moments when she would glance at him out of the corner of her eye and upon noticing him, she would just smile, as if she had caught him doing something mischievous. Small smiles, but they meant everything to him. "Only a few months," he muttered, closing his eyes for a second. "Just a few damn months and I already feel like I've worked with her my whole life." He felt something tighten in his chest, as if he had a knot in his heart. "So much so. So much that I fell in love with that stubborn hobbit," he whispered with a touch of sadness and a resigned smile. He let out a deep sigh, as if trying to release all the weight that was gnawing at him from within. She slowly lowered her forehead and rested it against the counter, letting the cold wood lower the temperature of her jumbled thoughts a little. "I couldn't even say goodbye to her," he said bitterly. "Not a goodbye. Not a take care. Not even a final look, nothing." He closed his eyes tightly, hitting his forehead repeatedly against the counter surface. "And just when I'd finally worked up the courage, just when I'd finally decided to tell her how I feel," he whispered, frustrated. "Stupid, I'm stupid." She remembered the last time they saw each other. The awkward silence. His boldness in kissing her cheek. A slight blush on her face, followed by her silence. And then, he just left. "I wish I could do it again," she thought, gritting her teeth, feeling heat rise to her cheeks from the mixture of embarrassment and desire. He glanced at the drinks shelf behind the counter. No alcohol. Her mother was very clear about that. But he needed to drown that nostalgia somehow. So he poured himself a cup of strong coffee and downed it in one gulp, as if it were a strong whiskey. "I miss her," he repeated bitterly, slamming the cup down on the bar, as if it were a jar. Crash. The sound of breaking china echoed through the empty cafeteria. "Shit," he cursed through gritted teeth. He bent down quickly, carefully picking up all the pieces while silently praying that his mother hadn't heard him. But apparently, that wasn't the case. Either he was lucky, or his mother simply didn't care about the broken cup. He threw the broken pieces into the trash can and stood there for a moment, motionless. "Why did you do it, Mom?" he thought, looking up at the ceiling, as if he could see her from there. "Why did you fire her?" Nothing made sense. Everything seemed to be fine. Even she, Althea, her mother, had praised Lyra's work on more than one occasion. In her own way, of course. Dry, distant. But she had done it. "I thought I was satisfied with her," she murmured. "I thought something was finally working out. But it was clear that it wasn't. Everything I had built with her, all those little routines, the shared moments, the jokes, the afternoons when we secretly shared a cookie away from the customers. It all went to hell overnight. And now, only silence remained. And the painful memory of him. He tried to talk to his mother about it. Why he had fired her. What had motivated such a sudden decision. But as always, Althea didn't give him a clear answer. "Don't overthink it, Belle," she said once without even looking up from the book she was reading. "I feel she served her punishment, so I freed her. Hestia alone is more than enough as a slave." That was it. That was their justification. And then, silence. Part of him had to admit that he sounded a lot like his mother. That way of answering, so sharp, as if she had the divine authority to decide when someone deserved freedom or servitude. But even so, I couldn't quite convince him. Something didn't add up. Something was out of place. As if there were another hidden reason, one he didn't want to tell her, one he didn't dare to tell her. Why? She asked herself over and over again as she cleaned the counter, mechanically repeating the circular motion of the rag. Did he find out how I felt about Lyra? He knew his mother. He knew she was a protective woman. Jealous even when it came to him. She had shown it dozens of times, like when she chased away the village girls who approached him with more enthusiasm than she liked. "I don't need you to be distracted with nonsense," he told her in that dry tone that left no room for reply. So? Was that it? Had he noticed her feelings for Lyra? Because it was the only explanation that made sense. From the moment she started working there, the hobbit did nothing out of the ordinary. She worked hard, didn't complain more than necessary, was punctual, cooked well, and treated customers kindly in her own way. So why? "It's not fair," he muttered to himself, dropping the rag onto the counter. It was his life. He wasn't a child anymore. He had the right to fall in love. To decide who he wanted to be with. It wasn't like he knew Lyra would accept it, but he at least wanted to try. At least to have said it. To have tried just once. "Damn it," he whispered, clenching his fists in frustration, as if he felt guilty about the hobbit's dismissal. "Are you still thinking about her?" The voice suddenly pulled him from his thoughts. Belle looked up listlessly. Hestia stood in the kitchen entrance dressed in her delivery uniform, carrying 2 boxes of bread and sporting a mischievous smile on her face. Belle just looked away, feeling her ears light up. Hestia let out an amused giggle. "Haha, I knew it. It shows on your face, you know. You look like a lost soul ever since she left." "Don't start, Kami-sama," he pleaded, putting a hand to his forehead. "Don't tell me no." You, who rejected all the girls who threw themselves at you, even when they literally offered themselves to you without any shame, the goddess said, approaching the counter and setting down the boxes. But she, Lyra, without doing anything special, without even trying, bam. She caught you. As if she'd thrown you an invisible chain. Belle looked away again, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. So what? He murmured. We don't choose who we fall in love with, and she's one of a kind. Huh? What did you say? Nothing. He replied nervously, even though he knew it was already late. You said she's unique, she repeated, with a mischievous smile on her face. Ami-sama, please don't start. Oh, how cute. Belle-kun is in love. She joked, gently patting him on the head as he tried to sink to the ground in embarrassment. Stop making fun of me. Okay, she said, laughing and stepping back a little. But seriously now. She turned to him with a softer, more understanding look. Don't worry, Belle-kun. I'm sure you'll see her again soon. How do you know? Well, Althea fired her as an employee, yes. But that doesn't stop her from coming as a customer, right? Belle blinked. He hadn't thought of that. If she cares for you, even just a little, as you care for her, Hestia continued, lifting the boxes again. Then you can be sure she'll show up here soon. And when she does, you'd better tell her how you feel before it's too late again, or at least savor the moment with her, you love-struck little darling. We are the same. She smiled, winking at him. I'll come back later. And with that said, she walked lightly through the exit door, leaving behind a light breeze and the smell of freshly baked bread that she carried with her. The cafeteria fell silent again. But this time, Belle's thoughts were different. A small hope appeared in her heart thanks to those words. And the smell of burning gradually awakened his depressed mind. Smell of burning. It took him a few seconds to realize. No, the bread. He shouted in alarm, running towards the kitchen, leaving the counter unattended, and at that moment the sound of the bell rang, signaling a new customer. Meanwhile, Belle took the bread out of the oven and saw that it was indeed burnt. Damn it, he whispered dejectedly, knowing his mother would be angry with him later. It wasn't that he cared about the losses. Rather, the scolding would be for being distracted. The last time was when Hestia burned it and well, I didn't want to remember it. The best thing would be to mentally prepare yourself for the scolding. Reluctantly, he placed the burnt bread on a table and began putting everything into a bag, tying it closed and leaving it to one side. I had prepared some of that bread because they no longer had any in the display cases and they still didn't have any due to their negligence. I just hoped the customer who had just arrived wouldn't order that bread because there was only charcoal. I hope mom doesn't get too mad. And with those thoughts I walked back to the counter while asking the classic question without looking at the customer. Good morning. What will you order? I asked, looking down at the bread displays in a tone that was somewhere between polite and bored. Well, I'd like some of that bread you just burned, careless rabbit. The albino froze. That voice. His heart skipped a beat, so strong that it almost made him lose his balance. No. It couldn't be. Was it his imagination? Was he dreaming? Quickly, as if something inside him had propelled him, he looked up with his eyes wide open. And there it was. Sitting at one of the tables, one leg crossed, a mocking smile on her face. That smile she knew so well. That smile she had missed so much. That smile Lyra's. That smile that she hadn't been able to get out of her mind. Lyra, he whispered, staring intently at her face. Hello, Belle, he whispered as both their eyes shone a little as if they hadn't seen each other in years. Perhaps Hestia was right and it wasn't the end of their story. End of chapter. Chapter 9. Did I do the right thing? It was the question Althea threw into the air, her voice echoing faintly in the silent office, as if even the sound doubted its right to break that moment. Well, when it came to Althea, that was normal. She sat alone in her high-back chair at her desk, a now cold cup of coffee clutched in her hands. The cup had a delicate floral design, a gift from Belle years before. One of the few objects she allowed in her private space. And yet, at that moment, even holding it felt heavy. She had supposedly locked herself in there to review accounts, reports, cafeteria paperwork and other administrative tasks, although, to be honest, that was all just an excuse. He had no shortage of money, resources, or stability. She had secluded herself there because she needed to think. Or distract herself. Or simply not be near her son. Not yet. But that day he hadn't done absolutely anything. He hadn't opened a single folder. He hadn't written down a single number. He had just sat there, cup in hand, staring at the ceiling of his office with an expression he didn't usually wear. Lost. It wasn't common to see her like this. Althea was firm, serious, intimidating, a woman who rarely doubted her own decisions, who commanded respect with just a look. But today. Today she wasn't the same. Today I was broken inside, although I wouldn't admit it even under torture. Did I do the right thing by firing that girl? He whispered to himself, wrinkling his forehead slightly. The coffee trembled in the cup as she slowly brought it to her lips and took a sip, bitter, more so than usual. Or perhaps it was simply that her mood wasn't improving at all. Lyra. That was the name he couldn't get out of his head. Damn hobbit. Alfea clicked her tongue and slammed the cup down, not breaking it, but hard enough that the porcelain clanged against the wood. Why her of all people? He murmured, staring into space. Yes. He'd always complained about Lyra. She was loud. Impulsive. Insolent sometimes. She had this habit of talking too much, of joking even when it wasn't appropriate. And her sarcasm, oh my god, that sarcasm. But. She was a good worker. I couldn't deny it. She was always punctual. She was quick, efficient, and yes, she admitted there was a certain naturalness to the way she served customers. Her cheerful and lively attitude was contagious. And when his shift ended, he stayed to help out. They didn't ask him to, but he did. He helped Belle and Hestia. Sometimes even silently. It wasn't just a facade, he really helped them. "DSK, what the hell am I doing thinking about it so much?" she whispered, annoyed with herself. The answer was obvious. He had fired her because of his son. By Belle. The only one who managed to break through his facade, his composure, his absolute control over everything. Belle, his precious and naive son. His greatest treasure. She had noticed it. For weeks. The way he looked at her. How his eyes lit up when Lyra appeared in the doorway. The way he smiled more genuinely when she was near. That slight lean he took towards her when they talked. She had seen everything. And then she overheard that conversation in the kitchen. That murmur between Lyra and Hestia. That confession disguised as gossip that pierced her chest like a dagger. Belle had kissed Lyra's cheek. A small but intimate and sincere gesture. Alfea remembered it perfectly. She could swear that at that moment her heart beat faster than normal. "Damn hobbit," he whispered again under his breath. Yes, that's what motivated her. Not Lyra's work. Not his attitude. Not even his jokes. It was fear. The fear of losing her son. That someone would come and take him away. That someone, like that noisy little hobbit, would take root in his heart and leave her out in the cold. I wouldn't allow it. Not now. Not yet. Belle couldn't leave. "Am I a jealous mother?" she asked aloud, letting out a bitter, muffled laugh. "Of course I am, and I don't care." She sighed heavily, resting both elbows on the desk, holding her forehead with her hands, as if the entire weight of the world were pressing down on her. She wasn't the right one for him, she said to herself, trying to convince herself. He'd only learn bad things. He'd become impulsive, unstable, and spoiled. She imagined Belle laughing with her, shouting, mocking everything. Being swept away by that whirlwind of energy and madness. And it hurt him. It hurt her because in that picture her son looked happy. Happier than ever. I can't trust her change. She could be faking it all, he murmured, as if clinging to that idea, since Lyra had changed her terroristic ways quite a bit during those months of working together, but he still had his doubts. But his mind, cruelly, showed him another image. Lyra's secrets. Cleaning tables unnoticed. Smiling gently when she looked at Belle. Covering his shoulders with a blanket when he fell asleep at the bar, though she didn't know that the blanket had a special powder on it that made people itch. And clearing dishes without being asked. Shit, she whispered through a clenched jaw, annoyed with herself. It was a whirlwind of contradictions. The firm, determined mother who couldn't get a brat out of her head. The tough woman who now doubted her own judgment. I made the right decision, he told himself, wanting to sound firm. He repeated those words to himself like a broken record. As if simply telling them was enough to make them true. I made the right decision, she repeated, looking down at the empty cup. But the silence from his office did not answer him. Not even coffee. Not even the desk. Not even the ceiling that I had been staring at all morning. Only his own heart beating with a strange weight. And no matter how hard I tried. He couldn't quite convince himself. And I already had the answer to that. His sister Materia. He slowly turned his gaze to one side of the desk, where a small photograph lay, carefully protected in an elegant varnished wooden frame. It was a photograph that had been cherished for years, as if it were an irreplaceable treasure. It was a picture of her, Alfea, being hugged by her sister. Materia was smiling as she always did, with that natural warmth that could light up even the coldest heart. The curious thing, the truly strange thing, was that in that photograph Alfea was smiling too. A faint smile, barely perceptible, but genuine. One of the few times she had shown anything resembling since birth. He stared at her for a few seconds. Maybe minutes. He didn't know. The office had fallen completely silent, just the way he liked it. He had created that coffee shop in honor of his sister. Materia was always the one who talked about sweets. I want to open a cafe, Alfea. One where I can eat cakes until my stomach hurts, she'd say, laughing. She loved sweet flavors, the smell of freshly baked bread, the colors of cakes, the crunch of caramelized sugar. For her, desserts were more than just food. They were a way to share love. Alfea glanced down at the desk where there were some unsigned reports. She paid them no attention. That place, that small corner she now managed with cold efficiency, had been born out of the need to keep that memory alive. A way to honor Materia. But also, deep down, it was a way to bring Belle closer to his real mother. She had spoken to Belle about her a few times, so he wouldn't forget her, but she knew it would never be the same. Belle wouldn't feel a real connection with Materia. But if she could make him love that place, make him feel it was his, make him feel comfortable there, perhaps, just perhaps, she could build an invisible bridge between them. When she saw Belle, so small, so clumsy and sweet, baking cakes with his little hands covered in flour, something inside her melted. She didn't show it, of course. Not in front of the others. But inside she felt warm. As if time had stood still. It was like seeing Materia once again. As if they were all together again. As if life hadn't been so cruel. That's all I wanted. For Belle to feel happy in that environment. For her to love what her mother once loved. For her to find happiness among sweet flavors and soft laughter. And for a moment, he succeeded. He had it. That little sparkle in Belle's eyes when he baked something new, when he served a slice of cake with a shy smile, was genuine. Until the Hobbit arrived. Until Lyra bin Laden appeared out of nowhere with her loud voice, her lack of filter, and that absurd confidence, she began to steal that spotlight. To draw him towards her. To share things with him. And then he fired her. Alfea's brow furrowed again, her fingers tapping lightly against the surface of the desk. The soft tapping was the only sound in the room. Since then, since Lyra left, I had seen Belle differently, quieter, more subdued. Crestfallen. He no longer laughed. He no longer approached the kitchen with enthusiasm. It was as if that place, which had once been a refuge for him, now felt uncomfortable. Alien. She had created that space for his happiness, and now, he seemed to have faded away. And all because of his decision. "Do you like that Hobbit that much?" he murmured with his eyes closed, pressing his lips together. I didn't understand it. I really didn't. Lyra only worked there for a few months. She arrived like a storm. She literally stormed the cafeteria with her raucous laughter and her audacity, and then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she became close to Belle. Too close. They laughed together, they talked, they exchanged jokes, and inside comments that Alfea didn't understand, they even shared glances. Small, gentle glances. Alfea had tried to ignore it. She had pretended not to notice. That it didn't bother her. But of course he did. And yet. Although she wouldn't admit it aloud, a part of her, a part she hated to acknowledge, was happy. Because she saw Belle happy. Truly happy. And now he had taken that away from her. Out of pride. Out of fear. Out of stupidity. "What am I supposed to do, Materia?" he whispered, staring at the photograph as if his sister could answer him from there. "Let him be happy, damn it. It doesn't cost you anything." She could hear her voice in her mind. That sweet melodious voice, but with that rebellious edge that was so characteristic of her. Because although many thought Materia was a fairy tale princess, she actually had a wild side. She swore when she felt comfortable, and she didn't hesitate to tell her to go to hell when she thought she deserved it. "Don't eat my sweets, you wretches." How many times had I heard him say that? He learned all those words thanks to his family, mainly from that foul-mouthed woman with purple hair. Yes, that's why he didn't like Lyra very much, because she reminded him of that woman in some way. "Damn it," she whispered softly, crossing her arms as she felt an annoying pang in her chest. It was guilt. It was frustration. It was not knowing what to do. Part of her resisted. He didn't want to accept that he had been wrong. She didn't want to accept that a clumsy and rude dwarf had achieved what she hadn't. Making Belle unconditionally happy. And on top of that, he has the nerve to laugh so loudly, she muttered sarcastically. Doesn't he know how to control his volume? But there was no force in his words. Only resignation. Silence. He looked at the door again. "I think I need to talk to Belle," she finally whispered, as if by saying it in a low voice, she wasn't fully accepting the obvious. As if he could still cling to a shred of pride. But it was too late. Not when he was no longer smiling. And that place no longer shone as before if it did not fulfill its purpose. So, having made the decision, he stood up and walked towards the door and left his office. I would talk to Belle about it and see what I could do. Although his pride was great, it crumbled when it came to him. "TSK, I can't believe he's doubting a decision I made myself," she thought frustratedly as she went down the stairs to the first floor. I would talk to Belle like a mother to a son. If Hestia was present, she would kick her out. And when she got to the cafeteria, she prepared to call him. "Hey Belle." But her words got completely stuck in her throat. Her eyes opened slightly and her body remained motionless, as if the world had suddenly turned in the wrong direction. There, at one of the tables near the window, he saw them. Bell, why Lyra? Nothing unusual, well yes, since Lyra was present. But that wasn't. What really disconnected her completely was what she saw. They were kissing. His gaze darkened. He said nothing. He made no gesture. He issued no order. But the aura surrounding her changed instantly. Heavy, like an approaching storm. The desire for dialogue has gone to shit. End of chapter. Chapter 10. Minutes before Althea entered the cafeteria and saw her son committing the greatest sin of his life. Belle and Lyra were seated at a table, facing each other with their hands on the table. They were both silent, not saying a word, while avoiding eye contact. After Lyra suddenly appeared in the cafeteria, she and Belle sat down, but not before he put the closed sign on the cafeteria door. I didn't want them to interrupt that important conversation because they were supposedly going to talk about what happened, the kiss on the cheek, Lyra's dismissal from the cafeteria and all that, but they had been sitting there for 5 minutes and hadn't said anything. Both were nervous and didn't dare to start the conversation. Come on Lyra, you're not like that, you're usually direct and sarcastic. You don't have to be nervous about that Nahual. Thought the hobbit, glancing sideways at the rabbit in human form. Although when she saw him her heart skipped a beat, making her quickly look away. Should I start with a hello? Or tell her I like her? No, that would be too sudden, I'd better ask if she wants something to eat or give her the menu so she can choose what she wants to order. Is she here as a customer to chat? Now that I think about it, my mom didn't deposit my paycheck. This is pathetic, Lyra thought, crossing her arms and sinking a little deeper into her chair. 5 minutes and not a word. What am I? A rock? A little girl who can't speak? I'm Lyra bin Laden. I blow things up and laugh at authority. How can I be like this? She looked away for a second and saw him. Bellcranel. The one to blame for everything. That cursed rabbit who with a single smile was capable of destabilizing his nervous system, collapsing his logic, ruining his plans and disarming his sarcasm. Damn you. He thought, glancing at him out of the corner of his eye. And all for a kiss on the cheek. And while that was happening in his head, in Belle's head there was no small amount of chaos. This is so awkward, I should say something like, it's nice to see you, or would you like some coffee? No, that sounds too generic maybe, did you miss the coffee shop? No, idiot. That sounds like I'm begging. Well, if I want to beg, why didn't I practice this beforehand? Why didn't I ask Kami-sama what to say? Oh, right, she'd laugh at me. Belle swallowed discreetly. They both still didn't speak. Only their hands rested on the table, one in front of the other. So close yet so far. Barely a few centimeters that neither dared to close. The silence continued until Lyra's stomach growled slightly. Belle blinked. Lyra blinked. That wasn't mine, she murmured, looking to the side in embarrassment. I can prepare something for you, he finally said, in a low but kind voice. Lyra looked at him suddenly, and when she saw him, she regretted it. Because when she did, her heart started racing again. What if I didn't come to eat? She said in a low tone, but with a touch of that gentle sarcasm that was typical of her when she was uncomfortable. So Belle replied, scratching the back of his neck. I can make tea or just sit here, or I don't know, shall we go out and look at the stars? It's daytime, you idiot, you're as nervous as I am, she replied with a barely audible giggle. Belle smiled involuntarily. And that was fatal for the hobbit, who involuntarily felt nervous again. Don't smile, you damn rabbit. She screamed mentally, bringing a hand to her face to cover her blush. That kiss on the cheek really affected him. Belle, seeing her like that, let out a small laugh. I'm glad you came, he said softly, looking at her. The truth is I've missed you. Hhhh. Lyra screamed internally as her entire emotional system collapsed. From the outside, he just crossed his arms and looked the other way. I only came because I was told I had to clear things up with you. Who told you that? My whole family, my goddess, and a pigeon that happened to be flying past the window. She suddenly shouted, embarrassed. And they're right, I need to set things straight with you. Belle blinked in confusion. But he smiled again. And did you come just for that? To chat? Lyra glanced at him askance. She looked down at the table, at her own hands, which she clasped slightly. Also because he murmured softly. I missed you, stupid. Belle looked at her in surprise, not believing that the hobbit had said that, while a somewhat silly smile appeared on his face. It was time to make a little joke. Yes, Belle whispered. Yes, what? Yes, I accept to marry you. The hobbit's face exploded in red upon hearing those words. I didn't mean that, you idiot. He yelled, grabbing a tray from a nearby table and slamming it into Belle's face. He fell backwards, his face red, letting out a groan of pain. Belle rubbed his forehead as he awkwardly got back to his feet, the tray still falling in slow motion to the floor. Why do you always end up hitting me when I say something nice? She complained with a mixture of amusement and pain. Because you don't know when to shut up, you hot little rabbit. she yelled, her face burning, looking anywhere but at him. The rabbit let out a soft chuckle, the kind he made when something embarrassed him, but he liked it at the same time. He rubbed his cheek and sat back down across from her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "It was a silly joke." Lyra glared at him, but this glare wasn't her usual sharp one. It wasn't accompanied by mockery or a grimace. It was embarrassment and nervousness, something completely out of character for her. "Fool," he muttered, lowering his head. "You and your stupid jokes. So talk to me," she whispered, resuming the conversation. The hobbit nodded slightly, still avoiding looking him in the eyes. "And what exactly?" "You know it perfectly well, you idiot," she whispered nervously. When you tried to eat my cheek." She wouldn't dream of saying the word kiss. That sweet word wasn't in her vocabulary at that moment. Belle just looked away, feeling both nervous and embarrassed when he heard that. Even though it was only her cheek, it felt good to kiss her. He still had the sensation etched in his memory. "I'm not stupid, I know very well why you did it." Lyra looked away again as she said that. But still, just to be sure, why did you do it?" "I simply didn't understand it." Her relationship with Belle was perfect. They started off on the wrong foot, with him making jokes and her hating him, but that gradually changed. That rabbit he used to hate, he began to see him as a great friend, to enjoy his company, his jokes, and so on. And even better, he had the same taste for bombs. He thought he had found his first best friend who wasn't one of the crazy ones in the family. And without any warning. He kisses her. It was something I never expected. Her? Lyra. Getting a kiss on the cheek from a boy. It sounded ridiculous. The boys weren't attracted to her, they just looked at her like she was a crazy terrorist, and that was fine, it didn't bother her. But that rabbit changed everything with that kiss and made her think about so many things that her head hurt. The quick kiss on the cheek turned her life upside down. Meanwhile, Belle stared at Lyra, who wanted to make eye contact with him but couldn't. The only boy who had ever managed to elicit that reaction from her. And then. "Belle, be honest." "Because I like you, Lyra." Silence. The long silence. Those who scream louder than any explosion Lyra has ever caused. Belle looked down for a second, nervous. He'd said it. Finally. He blurted it out. Even though his heart was beating so fast he felt like it was going to jump out of his chest. But he was finally able to say it. The hobbit, on the other hand, remained frozen. Blinking. Gasping for breath. As if his system had completely collapsed. What he finally managed to stammer, his voice breaking and his face completely red. What did you just say, you sick rabbit?" Even though she expected it, it still surprised her. Was a boy in love with her? "I like you," Belle repeated, now with a firmer voice. "I like you, Lyra. I have for a long time, long before that kiss. Although that day I realized I didn't want to keep hiding it. Well, I didn't really think anything, I just saw your cheek and wanted to kiss you." Lyra stared at him as if a bomb had just exploded in her face. Her face couldn't have been redder, and it looked like her brain was trying to reboot for the third time that day. "You're out of your mind," I whispered. "You're saying that to me with that face as if it's something normal." "It's not normal," he replied, smiling gently. "But it makes me happy. Feeling this way about you makes me happy, even though you throw trays at me or insult me every 10 seconds. And you still like me?" she shouted, throwing her arms up in the air. "Do you have some kind of self-esteem problem? Were you beaten as a baby? Were you raised by a dragon without love or affection?" "Well, my mom." "Ah." Lyra quickly understood what he meant. It wasn't that Althea was a heartless monster, but I had known her for several months to understand that. Belle let out a small laugh. Not because she was mocking him, but because that was just who she was. Explosive, sarcastic. And even in that chaos, she was completely herself. And he liked that. "Maybe, but if that was the case, at least it helped me to meet someone like you." Lyra looked at him as if she wanted to hit him again, but this time, she didn't. She lowered her gaze. She clenched her fists. She bit her lower lip. Her breathing was nervous, and in her chest there was a pitched battle between her pride, her emotions, her doubts, and that thing she had felt for a long time and didn't want to admit. "This is madness," he murmured, barely audible. "You this?" Belle leaned forward slightly, but without making her uncomfortable. "I'm not asking for an answer right now," she said quietly. "I just wanted you to know. And to know that I don't regret what I did. Even if you threw me another tray, I'd still think it was the best kiss I've ever given." "It was on the cheek, you idiot," she yelled, her face even redder. "But it was with you," he whispered. Lyra froze. "I didn't know how to act. I really didn't know how to act in those kinds of love situations. It was the first time I had been involved in something like this." But the boy confessing his love for her. His pride wanted to kick him. His heart wanted to hit him. And his brain just wanted to turn everything off and restart. "This is a nightmare," she said, bringing her hands to her face and hiding behind her arms. "I still don't know why you like me. If I say why I like it, I probably won't finish now. Don't get all mushy." She still remembered how one day Mariu arrived very embarrassed because she had received a confession from a boy from the Ganesha family. Even though she rejected him, she still felt embarrassed and nervous. She used to make fun of her friend and her reaction, but now she understood her. "I understood what the heart felt when someone confessed. And even more so if he cared about that person." Lyra kept her hands on her face for several seconds. She didn't want him to see her like that, with her cheeks burning, her heart pounding as if she had run a marathon, and that expression she couldn't tell if it was from fear, excitement, or emotional collapse. "You're completely crazy," he muttered from behind his arms. "Totally messed up in the head." "Probably," Belle replied, without losing that gentle smile. "And yet you still confess this to me as if it were just any other day." There was a brief silence. Lyra slowly lowered her hands. She looked at him. His eyes were serious, nervous, yes, but also determined. He didn't have that mocking or confident expression he usually used as a shield. And then, he said what Belle didn't expect. "Maybe," he murmured softly. "Maybe I feel something for you too." Belle froze. For a second he thought he had misheard. What? "Don't make me repeat myself, you animal," she shouted, blushing, slamming both fists on the table. It was embarrassing enough saying it once. Belle blinked, his expression one of pure astonishment. But then his smile grew warmer, more genuine. As if a million emotions had suddenly surged through his chest. As if he had won the lottery even though he knew the government would keep half of it. "Lyra, that means." "But," she interrupted firmly, raising a hand and pressing her lips together. "I'm not ready for a relationship." "Hey? You heard me. I'm not ready," she said, looking down. "I don't know how this works. I'm not like those pretty girls who have experience. I don't know how to be a girlfriend." "You don't have to know, I don't know how to be a boyfriend either," he said quickly, scratching the back of his neck. "But you're an idiot. You don't care about messing things up, you always dive right in," she yelled. "And I freeze up at your damn smile. That's not fair." Belle lowered his head slightly. "I don't want to ruin our friendship," she added in a lower voice. "I don't want this to end badly and for me to be left without you. Ugh, I can't believe I said that." Belle looked up and saw her. There was Lyra. Not the explosive one, not the sarcastic one, not the terrorist. It was her with her vulnerable side. "So what do you want us to do?" he asked softly. Lyra stared at him, biting her lower lip until her cheeks turned red again. She had already made the decision yesterday after thinking about it for hours in her room. "1 month," he finally said. "Just 1 month." "A month?" "Yes. 1 month to test." "Test what?" Ugh, Lyra hid her face in her arms on the table again. "To prove what we are, the almost something." Belle narrowed his eyes. "Almost something?" he repeated with an amused smile. "Exactly. We're not a couple, but we're not just friends either. Almost something. For a month now," she said, trying to control her nerves. "We do things together. We go out, we walk, you make me laugh. I insult you, I throw trays at you. Normal stuff. And at the end of the month." Lyra looked at him, this time without hiding in her hands. "At the end of the month, if everything goes well, we'll see if that almost something becomes something for real." Belle couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't mockery. It was relief. Happiness. The kind of joy that can't be put into words. He hadn't won, but he felt like it was a victory. "Deal," he said, extending his hand. Lyra glanced at him sideways and after a few seconds of hesitation, stretched out her small hand and shook it. 1 month, you stupid rabbit. Don't ruin it." "What if you ruin it?" "So you forgive me then," she said with a mischievous smile. "Because you like me, right?" Belle blushed. But he didn't deny anything. "A lot." Lyra blushed again and quickly looked away. "Don't push your luck or I might change my mind and smash a vase over your head." "I'll add that to the list of risks of being in the almost something with a terrorist," Belle laughed. Lyra crossed her arms, but couldn't stop a small smile from forming on her face. The air in the cafe felt different, light and filled with new possibilities. For the first time that afternoon, there was no awkward silence, only a pleasant atmosphere. Just as Belle was about to say something else, Lyra stood up abruptly. "I almost forgot something," she said, the mischievous smile from before returning to her face, but somewhat nervously. "I've come for revenge." Belle was perplexed. "Revenge? For what?" he asked nervously. Lyra looked at him with a serious expression, but her eyes shone with determination. "For my cheek, you idiot. Don't think you got away with it." Belle opened his eyes, his mind now in a state of panic. Was he going to hit him again? Throw another tray at him? Use one of his explosives? He flinched, bracing for the blow. But he didn't come. Instead, Lyra leaned toward him. Belle froze, unsure what to do. Lyra was so close he could smell her delicate scent. Lyra hesitated for a moment. She remembered her friend Iska's words before leaving the headquarters. "Lyra, I know you're going to talk to that guy, Belle. If you want revenge for the kiss, do the same to him. That way you'll embarrass him like he embarrassed you. You'll see he won't feel so clever. It'll be fun." Lyra had hesitated, but the idea of seeing Belle blushing and embarrassed had convinced her. It was her revenge for the embarrassment he had caused her. Now that she was inches from his face, the plan seemed ridiculous. But she'd already started. There was no turning back. She closed her eyes and moved, aiming her lips at Belle's cheek. It would be a quick kiss, just a touch. Yes, that's all. Belle, meanwhile, was in complete shock. Watching Lyra approach, his heart was racing. He didn't know what she was going to do, so he turned his face away to avoid being hit directly in the face. But just at that moment the door that connected to the second floor was opened. Belle, without thinking, moved again, tilting his face to look at the door. Lyra, who had her eyes closed due to nerves, did not notice the movement. And instead of kissing her cheek, their lips met. It wasn't a passionate kiss. It was a collision. A brief clumsy brush, but one they felt like an electric shock. They both froze. Time stood still. Lyra's face turned crimson, so intense that Belle thought it might explode. Belle himself felt his soul leave his body. They had kissed. On the lips. For real. A simple joke turned into their first kiss, and perhaps because of the total shock, neither of them moved away. They just stayed there with an expression of having committed the worst sin. And right at that moment. "Hey Belle." Althea went in and saw them. "Ah." The woman's voice was all they needed to suddenly pull apart, their faces completely red, not believing what they had just done. Meanwhile, Althea. Oh Althea. Beautiful woman. She was foaming at the mouth with rage at the sight of the culprit behind her headaches. And now he was abusing his son in the living room. Lyra. And the Hobbit knew. That she was dead. Gospel. End of chapter. Chapter 11. Althea let out a tired sigh. One who is very tired. His gaze wandered around his office looking for something to soothe his headache. And if the goth woman was in her office trying to relax. But no matter how much he looked, he couldn't calm down. He couldn't calm down. Not after seeing that kiss. That kiss between his son and that hobbit. But where were they both? Well, Belle and Lyra were downstairs cleaning up all the mess that had been made in the cafeteria. All because of an accidental kiss. "What do I do?" he whispered, lightly clenching his fists. Flashback. Gospel. Althea's voice echoed with an icy fury that made the walls of the cafe shake. She had witnessed what she considered the greatest of sins. That hobbit, Lyra, kissing her son. Rage, like a wave, surged through her chest, clouding her judgment. Without hesitation and without thinking of the consequences, she unleashed her magic. She didn't use all her power, just enough to punish that audacious woman for her boldness. Belle saw the flash of magic in his mother's eyes, and without thinking twice, he stepped between the attack and Lyra. In an instant, she stood before the hobbit, raised her palm with a determination she had never shown before, and just like her mother, shouted. "Gospel." Lyra, her eyes still wide from the shock of the kiss, saw a burst of magic erupt from Belle's hand. Both magics, mother's and son's, collided in the center of the cafeteria. The impact was brutal. A powerful gust of wind and light enveloped them, filling the air with explosive energy. Although Althea's magic was undeniably superior, Belle's was enough to deflect the shockwave, preventing it from directly hitting Lyra. The impact sent them flying. Belle was flung to one side, landing on a pile of broken chairs and shattered tables. Lyra, a little further back, crashed into a shelf full of cups and plates that rained down around her like broken glass. Althea, meanwhile, stood motionless, her brow furrowed, her expression so intense it seemed she could set the place ablaze. She dodged the tables and chairs flying around her, her gaze fixed on the two young men on the floor. Belle let out a soft groan of pain, trying to get up. She brushed the debris off herself, rubbing her forehead with a grimace. "You're all crazy," Lyra whispered, emerging from a pile of broken wood and porcelain. She brushed the dust off her clothes and surveyed the scene. Half the cafe, the place where they'd shared so many laughs, was now a wreck. Broken chairs, overturned tables, and cake scraps scattered across the floor. She was stunned. The hobbit couldn't believe that they had both cast such powerful magic in such a small space. In fact, she was even more surprised by the fact that Belle could use such strong magic without an incantation. For a moment, her mind went blank, and the hobbit simply wondered, what level was that? Had that rabbit been keeping an ace up his sleeve all this time? Lyra looked at Althea, who was staring at her with a look that was pure fire. Then she looked at Belle, who was struggling to his feet. She felt trapped, like a mouse between two lions. So that's what he did, he thought, remembering that day in the dungeon where all the monsters suddenly disappeared. Bell stood there, trembling slightly, his breath ragged from the shock and the adrenaline. His fists were clenched with quiet fury. The look in his eyes was that of a protector, a man who refused to back down. Lyra lay on the ground, stunned, but her mind was already beginning to piece things together. The day in the dungeon, the monsters, the power explosion, it all made sense. Bell wasn't just a pastry chef. He was an adventurer, and not just any adventurer, but one with considerable experience. You dare use my own spells against me? Althea's voice was as cold as ice, but there was a hint of pain in it. Never in her entire life had she seen Bell look at her like that. If it's to protect Lyra, yes, Bell whispered, his voice barely a murmur, but filled with unwavering conviction. If necessary, I'll face you, Mom. The words struck Althea like rocks in her heart. She saw her looking at her not with fear, but with defiance. That sweet boy, that rabbit she had cared for and protected, now stood before her like a wall. It was the first time he had truly confronted her, and his gaze hurt more than any blow. He's really in love, Althea thought, the idea striking her like a bolt of lightning. She looked at the hobbit on the ground, who was staring at her with a mixture of fear and a desire to confront her somehow. That little hobbit had managed what no one else had been able to. Break down the wall she had built around her son. So many girls who had tried to get with Bell never succeeded because of her but Lyra. Clink. Then the sound of the bell was heard in the place, catching the attention of the three. It was Hestia. Hey, why does the door have a closed sign? What happened? The little goddess screamed in horror upon seeing part of the cafe destroyed. Then his gaze fell upon the three people present, mainly on the hobbit. Lyra. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Lyra shouted, rising completely from the ground, her hands on her hips. I only came here in peace to talk to that fool. Not this. This is what I get for being interested in the town weirdo. Bell smiled. A glimmer of happiness, a spark of hope, shone in his eyes. Completely ignoring the destruction around them, he listened only to Lyra's words. You just said you like me. She shouted with joy. Shut up. Lyra ordered, feeling her cheeks flush again. While the young pair remained in their own bubble of chaos and confusion, Althea let out a long, heavy sigh. A sigh that came from the very depths of her being. She had allowed anger to take over, an emotion she usually kept under control. And now, the result of her carelessness was right before her eyes. Her gaze swept across the cafe, taking in the devastation. Overturned tables, broken chairs, shattered glass scattered across the floor. The place she had created as a sanctuary, as a way to honor a memory, was now destroyed by the rage she couldn't control. And then her eyes fell on Bell. He had stopped arguing with Lyra and was now looking at her with the same defiant stare. The same stare that had broken her heart just moments before. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man. And that frightened her more than anything. Bell, her voice was soft, almost a whisper. No. Bell shook her head. I will confront you. And I will not forgive you if you do anything to Lyra. Belcon, Hestia said, cautiously approaching the scene. You should calm down a bit. Althea, you too. Shut up, Althea ordered. No. I'm not going to back down, Bell said, taking a step forward. He was hurt, with small cuts on his face and arms, but his determination was a shield stronger than any armor. She's not a problem. What's between us isn't a problem. It's a good thing, Mom. Althea looked at him with a frown. No. It isn't. She distracts you, makes you weak. Her presence. Her presence makes me happy, Bell interrupted, his voice cracking for a second, but he recovered. Ever since you fired her, Mom, the cafeteria felt empty. And I felt empty. Her son's confession hit her with overwhelming force. Althea remembered the time she spent in his office, hesitating. The emptiness she had noticed in him, the feeling that had so disturbed her. Bell wasn't making anything up. He felt the same way she thought. The SK, but Althea still refused to accept it. That hobbit is definitely manipulating you. What? Exclaimed Lyra, indignant. I haven't manipulated anyone. And for your information, you're a problem for him too. You're the problem. Lyra? Bell exclaimed in surprise. You're the one keeping him locked up in this kitchen. You're the one preventing him from being happy. Lyra, her eyes blazing with anger, fearlessly approached Althea. He's not your toy that you can keep locked away forever. Your stupid motherly jealousy is what's causing this, not me. That's it. Hestia shouted, getting excited, but immediately regained her composure, knowing she had to be the voice of reason. Lyra's words were a direct blow to Althea's confidence. She had called her jealous and accused her of manipulating Bell. Worst of all, deep down, she knew there was some truth to it. Her hands trembled slightly, an emotion she rarely felt. The anger was gone, replaced by fear, not fear of the hobbit, but rather of what might happen. That's enough. All three of you are acting like children. Hestia approached them, frowning. The cafeteria is wrecked. The damage is done. Now you need to fix it. Stop fighting like you can't talk to each other like the adults you are. Althea looked at her with annoyance. This is none of your business, you useless goddess. Of course it concerns me, Hestia replied, her voice strangely firm. If the cafe is destroyed, we'll lose money. And if we lose money, I won't have anything to eat. So yes, it concerns me. Hestia's statement, so simple and selfish, was the dose of reality they needed. Althea sighed, closing her eyes. Belle, Lyra and Hestia watched her, waiting for her next move. Finally, Althea opened her eyes. Her gaze was no longer one of anger, but of weariness. You're right, she said quietly, looking at the mess. The cafeteria is a disaster, they have to fix it. Do they have any? Lyra whispered, her eye twitching. Come on, we need to calm down, Belle said, dropping his serious demeanor and becoming nervous again. She had just cast her magic on her mother. I still couldn't believe it. Don't you dare question me, Althea said, her tone less an order and more a warning. Her gaze was cold, but the fire she'd once felt was gone. This mess is your doing, so you clean it up. But nothing do it. End of flashback. And after giving her that order, Althea immediately went up to her office because she felt that at any moment she would explode upon seeing that hobbit's face. She needed to calm down. But I couldn't. Althea let out another tired sigh. A very tired one. Her gaze wandered around her office, searching for something, anything, to soothe her headache. No matter how much she looked at the books, the papers or the decorative objects, it didn't calm down. She couldn't calm down. Not after that kiss. That kiss between her son and that hobbit. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to erase the image from her mind. Belle's face, with that expression of surprise and joy, and Lyra's, flushed with embarrassment. The way they separated, as if they had committed a crime. But for her, it was worse than a crime. It was a sin. What do I do? He repeated, still clenching his fists. Part of her wanted to go downstairs, grab Lyra by the collar, and throw her out of the cafeteria for good. To end their relationship before it could blossom any further. To protect Belle from the pain she knew Lyra, with her explosive personality, would inevitably inflict on him. She knew those kinds of girls. They would only hurt him just like all the others who tried to get close to him. But another part of her, a smaller, more vulnerable one, reminded her that Belle wasn't a child. That he was the one who had put himself in the middle of the attack. That he was the one who had confronted her. He remembered the look in Belle's eyes, that defiant look he'd never seen before. That look that said he'd do anything for that hobbit. He realized it hadn't been a tantrum. It was a shout, the voice of a man who had found something that made him happy. Why? He thought, lifting his head to look at a photo on his desk. It was that special photo with his beloved sister. Althea traced a finger across Materia's face. She had created this cafe in her honor. She wanted the place to be a refuge, a place filled with happiness, just as Materia had been for her. And Belle was the embodiment of that happiness. With him, she felt that Materia still lived on, that her legacy continued. But now, that hobbit had entered Belle's life. She had shattered the peace, the order, the memories that Althea had so carefully protected. Lyra was a storm that would soon sweep Belle away with her. I felt anger when I thought about it. But more than anger, it was concern. It wasn't because of the kiss. That's why that kiss meant. It meant that he was growing up. That she was living her own life. How soon? I was going to leave her. The thought hit her hard. The fear that had consumed her wasn't for Lyra or for Materia or for the memory. It was the fear of being abandoned. The fear of losing Belle, his son. She felt like a fool. Her anger had been a shield for her pain. She had tried to control Belle's happiness for fear it would slip through her fingers. And in doing so, she had pushed him away. She had made him cast a spell on her, something she never would have imagined. Althea stood up, her mind a little clearer now. She had to make a decision. She could continue with her anger, continue fighting against her son's happiness, risking losing him forever. Or she could give in. Not for Lyra, not for the cafeteria debacle, but for Belle. For that boy who had become a man and who needed her to let him go. But it was so difficult. Knock, knock. And then there was a knock on his office door and he already knew who it was. Come in, Hestia, Althea whispered, lowering her gaze. Upon receiving approval, the little goddess entered the office with a calm expression, a sign that she had come to talk. Hello. What do you want? Althea asked, her voice annoyed, or at least she was trying to make it sound that way. I didn't come here to fight you, Hestia replied calmly. I came here to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Of course there is, Althea, I'm a goddess and I can notice what people can't. All this hurts you, you're more worried than angry. Althea looked away in annoyance. It bothered her deeply that Hestia had been able to see right through her. The little goddess, with her eternal naivety, always seemed to know when something was wrong and that irritated her more than Althea's meddling. Your words are nothing but nonsense, Althea spat, trying to sound as confident as possible. They're not, Hestia's voice softened, almost compassionate. The fear in your eyes isn't anger. It's the fear of losing someone you love. You don't hate Lyra. You're just afraid that Belle will stop seeing you as the most important thing, that he won't need you anymore." Althea clenched her fist slightly upon hearing those words but remained silent. That action made Hestia smile slightly. Althea loved Belle very much, although she almost never showed it with actions. As Althea understood it, she loved him as much as she had come to love her sister, the only two people she had ever loved in her entire life. So I partly understood Althea's fear, the fear that Belle would leave forever. Although with her actions the only thing she would achieve was making that fear come true, and the little goddess didn't want that. Even though she was kidnapped by Althea the day she descended from the sky, that cafe was her home, and she didn't want anyone to leave. So for once she would put aside her lazy and joking side and act like the goddess she was to help with the family problems of these three mortals. "She was very important to you, wasn't she?" Hestia asked, her voice filled with empathy, as she walked over to the desk and picked up the photo of herself and Materia. "And you created this place, this cafe, so she wouldn't be forgotten. So her memory would live on, at least in you and her son." Althea nodded, then looked down. She wanted Belle to remember her. To know that she was an incredible woman. That the happiness she felt here was the happiness she wanted people to feel. She wanted a part of her to always be with her son. And he knows that the memory of his mother, even though he never met her, will always be with him. But that hobbit ruined everything. "Of course not," she chuckled softly, placing the photo back on the desk. "Belle's love for Lyra isn't a replacement for your sister. It's something new. Something he's built on his own. Don't you think Materia would be happy to see that Belle has found happiness for himself?" Althea remained silent, her eyes closed. Hestia's words hurt, but they were true. Her sister, the kindest and most generous person she had ever known, would have wanted Belle to be happy, not to live only in a memory. "I never met her, but from your expression I can see it's something Materia would do," she whispered, moving closer to Althea. "But even so, forgetting the memory of your sister isn't your greatest fear. It's the fear that he'll leave and leave you alone." Althea just clicked her tongue when she heard that. "You're not going to lose him," Hestia said, placing her palm on the woman's shoulder. "A mother's love is different. And Belle's love for you isn't going to disappear just because he falls in love with someone else. It's a different kind of love, one that doesn't compete with yours. As I told you, you don't hate Lyra, at least not entirely," Hestia said, her voice soft but firm. "You're just afraid that Belle will stop seeing you as the most important person in his life. And that fear is the fear of a mother who loves her child very much. And you're afraid that Belle won't need you anymore. Yes, I know Lyra is a very chaotic person. In fact, her first impression wasn't the best," she said with a nervous smile, remembering how a sudden bomb had fallen in the cafeteria. "But despite that, I can see in her eyes that she really cares about Belle, even if she tries to deny it. You yourself have seen how close they've become in all these months at the cafeteria. Just leave them alone, Althea, and you'll see how happy Belle will be, and even happier, since he'll have you by his side too." The woman looked up and saw Hestia frowning, although there was no anger in her expression. "I hate it when you act like a wise woman, it makes me feel like a little girl." "Haha, it's because in my eyes all mortals are children who will never stop learning from life, even I need to learn." Althea lowered her gaze again after the little goddess's speech. Sometimes she acted so foolishly that she forgot she was a divine being. Finally, he let out a long sigh and looked her in the eyes. "Thank you." Hestia opened her eyes in surprise upon hearing those words come out of Althea, but seconds later she smiled with joy. "You're welcome, Althea, it makes me happy to help, and remember Belle will always be with you." Slowly, Althea went down the stairs, remembering Hestia's words. "Even though it was difficult, I had to do it." Although he didn't entirely like that hobbit, she was the girl his foolish son had chosen. The closer he got to the cafe door, the more he heard both of their voices. It looked like they were arguing. "This is the last time you kiss me out of nowhere, you wretched rabbit," Lyra warned, her voice showing her nervousness. "Me? But you were the one who kissed me out of nowhere." Belle's voice was heard, also sounding nervous. "That wasn't my intention, I just wanted to give you a kiss on the cheek as revenge for what you did last time. Those are just excuses, you were just looking for a way to take advantage of my innocence, so rejoice you succeeded. Don't get so carried away. It was just an accident. Accidents don't exist and you want the almost something to be like this. Wouldn't it be better to just start dating already?" "Shut up. Your mother almost killed me just because of almost. I don't even want to imagine what will happen next. You're a danger to me." My mom doesn't do it with bad intentions." "Haha, yes, very believable." Althea only shook her head slightly upon hearing that conversation. In some ways, the two of them were somewhat similar, and although he hated it, he had to admit that they had chemistry. He knew it from the first moment he saw them interact. "I can't believe I'm going to do this. And with those words, Alfia opened the door and entered the cafeteria. Elle and Lyra, seeing that the final boss had entered, quickly fell silent, with the latter frightened, believing that he had come to kill her. Meanwhile, Alfia just watched the cafeteria. Although he was only up there for about an hour, they had already almost completely cleaned up the mess. They just needed to buy tables and build a new counter to reopen the cafe. But I'll leave that for tomorrow. After seeing the cafeteria, she turned her gaze towards the duo, who became nervous, especially Lyra when she saw that he was looking at her. Ah. And Alfia let out a tired sigh. She wouldn't make a big deal out of it with a long speech and all that. That wasn't something she would do. So he would do it his way, one without so many words, just enough to make the message clear. So he walked towards the hobbit and stared at her, well she couldn't help but feel intimidated, feeling that he would soon unleash the goshel, or whatever it was called. And then. Alfia spoke. Words that neither of us expected. Tomorrow. Alfia whispered, leaving them both puzzled. Huh? Lyra tilted her head in confusion. Tomorrow what? If you want, you can come back to work at the cafeteria tomorrow at the same time. Alfia's voice was flat, lacking the fury it had held before. There was a surrender in her tone, a resignation that neither of them had expected. Elle blinked in disbelief. Lyra was speechless. Had they heard right? Alfia was allowing Lyra to work with them again. After all the destruction. And in case you're wondering, Alfia continued, and in a gesture that let them know the conversation was ending, she turned to leave. This time it will be with payment. Lyra stood silent, her mouth agape. Bell, beside her, was frozen, his face a mixture of joy and astonishment. Alfia's imposing figure slowly walked away toward the stairs. Although he paused for a moment, his back straight and without turning around, he uttered his last words. Don't disappoint me, Hobbit, or I'll kill you. The message was clear. Alfia wasn't going to forgive Lyra if she messed up. But she was tolerating her. And with that tolerance, she was accepting the relationship between her and Bell or whatever it was they had. The door closed behind Alfia, and silence reigned once more, broken only by another plate falling to the floor because of Bell, who dropped it. What? Lyra whispered, still surprised by what she had just heard. What did he say? Little by little, Bell's eyes began to shine as he turned to look at Lyra, who was still reeling from the shock. You did it, Lyra. Bell shouted, hugging the hobbit and lifting her off the ground. Obviously, that action embarrassed her quite a bit. Hey, you idiot. Put me down. Mom approved. We can continue working together. But I didn't come here looking for a job. I just came to talk to you. And I already told you to let me down. Aren't you happy? Lyra's cheeks flushed slightly as she saw Bell's expression, forcing her to look away. You may be a little. Those words were more than enough to make Bell smile happily again. He didn't know how or when, but he had truly fallen in love with that explosive hobbit. There was a charm about her that I simply couldn't ignore. While Bell celebrated and Lyra yelled at him to put her down, Alfia walked towards the second floor letting out a tired sigh. What she had just done was the hardest decision she had ever made in her entire life. She only hoped she wouldn't regret it. You did the right thing, Alfia. And when he finished climbing, he saw Hestia standing in front of his door with a proud smile. Alfia narrowed her eyes without taking her gaze off the goddess, who became nervous. That? No. Didn't you say that? The woman took a few steps towards Hestia and brought her face close until she was just a few centimeters from the goddess and looked at her with empty eyes. If that hobbit hurts my son, I won't kill her, he whispered, placing a hand on Hestia's shoulder. I'm going to kill you, since you were the one who insisted I accept them. You've been warned. And with those words Alfia entered her office, leaving Hestia outside with a pale face from that threat. And with a single thought passing through his mind. Lyra, please don't screw this up. A new chapter in the lives of the people in that cafe had begun. End of chapter. Chapter 12. It's funny how you go from hating a place to really liking it without even realizing it. Perhaps it's because you spend too much time in that place. Or perhaps because at first you didn't notice the hidden charm it possessed. Or perhaps. Maybe. Because there's someone you care about there. That was the case of Lyra, the explosive hobbit of the Estrie family, in the cafe of the kind and smiling Alfia. Although in his case it was a bit of all three options. Spending so much time with him every day made me grow fond of him. As the days went by, she noticed certain details that she hadn't noticed before and that made her like the place more, such as baking cakes, which curiously became one of her favorite pastimes, along with creating bombs. Those two things made the lively, explosive girl appreciate that place. But there was still the third option, and the one that made me appreciate the cafe the most, even though I was reluctant to admit it. And that was because Belle worked there too, her almost something the only one who could make her stutter without her realizing it. As much as he denied it, he had to admit that it was the main reason why he woke up with a slight smile in the morning, wondering what new crazy thing he would do with Belle. That's what made me enjoy spending much more time in that place. So much so that he had divided his time between work and his family obligations. In the morning he patrolled with his team and in the afternoon he worked at that location. He told his goddess that this routine would be temporary and that he would soon be patrolling all day as before. But perhaps that decision changed as the days went by, a decision which she hoped her friends would take well, but it wasn't the right time for that yet. It was crazy how much his life had changed since he threw his bomb at that place, a moment he cursed, although now he thought that perhaps it wasn't so bad to have done it. It is true that I had Alfia as my boss and that she was a complete headache, but from that day on, when I accepted that she was even working, her personality had relaxed somewhat. She was still the same grumpy old woman who hated noise, but at least now she didn't look at her with those deathly eyes. It seemed that little by little he was starting to like her, or at least that's what he wanted to believe. And a month had passed since that day when she and Belle started their almost something, and Alfia accepted their closeness. Exactly 1 month, well, a little more, 1 month and 5 days. In theory, Lyra should have already given Belle her answer about what they would do now that the trial date, as she had called it, had been fulfilled, but she still hadn't said anything. Lyra knew she was prolonging this moment for too long. She herself had set the trial period to see if things with Belle would work, and now that the deadline had passed, the mere thought of giving an answer made her stomach clench. It wasn't exactly fear, but something similar. Maybe nerves. Perhaps the absurd feeling that, by saying it out loud, everything would change. From that day on, Belle never brought up the subject, perhaps so as not to pressure her, or because he had grown tired of waiting for her. Whatever it was, every thought prevented her from giving her answer, an answer that she already had, in fact. It was an answer I'd had for 2 weeks, but I couldn't find the right moment to say what I'd been keeping to myself. Her friends, except Kagaya, kept asking her when she would give them her answer, saying that if she didn't hurry something might happen that she would regret later. Far from calming her down, that made her more nervous and under much more pressure. I had never been in those situations before and I was afraid of doing something wrong and hurt him. She was surprised at how much she had changed since she started working at the cafeteria. She had changed so much that now the bombs, although she still made them, were not her top priority. Astri was right, that place would change her, and apparently it would continue to change her. And that didn't bother him. Lyra. At that moment, Belle's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Lyra stood with her hands resting on the kitchen counter of the cafe, staring at a fixed point on the floor until she heard her name. When she turned her gaze, she met Belle's red eyes, feeling her heart race for a few seconds. "Yes, Rabbit," he said, trying to sound casual, but his voice trembled a little. With each passing day, she felt more nervous around him. Belle, with a tray of freshly baked cakes in his hand, approached her with a smile that made her even more nervous. In the past she never thought she would be like this over a boy, and now it was unbelievable. "We've finished baking. Now we just need to clean everything up." During that month, their relationship had gone through several phases. At first, the tension between them was noticeable for many reasons. Alfia's gaze, though less hostile, was a constant reminder that they were being judged. But over time, the tension had dissipated, replaced by a comfortable familiarity. Belle and Lyra had developed a routine. He baked, she decorated. He cleaned the counter, she waited tables. In between, there was always time for a laugh, a sarcastic comment, or a joke. And when Belle wasn't noticing, Lyra stared at him, observing his focused expression as he cleaned the counter. And I had to admit that he was attractive, very attractive. Why? Why did he fall in love with her? Is Alfia ever going to help us with anything? Lyra asked boredly, picking up a rag to clean the tables. Haha, you know how mom is, it's best to leave her alone, haha. Yes, I think it's for the best. Belle placed the tray on the counter and rolled up his sleeves a little more to begin cleaning. Lyra forced herself to look away, focusing her attention on wiping down one of the tables, even though she was actually cleaning the same spot over and over again. "Hey, I think that table is already clean. If you keep going like this, you'll make the wood disappear," Belle commented with a half smile, while watching her out of the corner of his eye. "Hush, I'm polishing," she replied, pressing the cloth a little harder as if it were entirely intentional. "I want it to shine. If it shines any brighter, customers will need sunglasses," he joked, grabbing a bucket of water to rinse some utensils. Lyra glanced at him out of the corner of her eye and smiled slightly, though she didn't want him to notice. There was something about his relaxed way of working that she found comforting. It wasn't just that he was good at what he did. It was that he seemed to genuinely enjoy it, and that made her enjoy it too. After all, if I've grown fond of that place, it's largely thanks to him. Meanwhile, Belle continued cleaning in silence, humming a melody that Lyra did not recognize. "What are you singing?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Huh? Nothing, it's just a song Mom used to hum when I was little," he replied without stopping his work. "It gets stuck in my head every time I bake something sweet." Lyra bowed her head. "Alfia humming. I have to hear it to believe it," he said, not believing that woman would do something like that. Belle let out a laugh of amusement. "She used to do that. Now she just complains about the noise and stuff," she said, imitating Alfia's angry look, which came out almost identically, causing Lyra to burst out laughing. "He's good at looking at you like he wants to kill you with his eyes," she remarked, placing the rag on the table. "Yes, but believe me, he looks at you much less now than before," he replied, looking up to meet her eyes. "I suppose it's because he's putting up with you." "Tolerating?" Lyra raised an eyebrow. "That's enough for me." They both laughed. The next few minutes passed as they worked in silence, broken only by the occasional clatter of plates being put down and the rustling of cloths against the wood. Outside, the light of the setting sun filtered through the window, bathing the interior in a warm glow that made everything seem more peaceful. Meanwhile, Lyra just stared at the table she was cleaning. For some reason, that day felt different. As if that day he could release everything. Everything I felt. She didn't know why, but something told her she had to do it. I put the rag down on the table and turned to look at Belle, who was still focused on cleaning. That idiot. She still couldn't believe how much her life had changed since she met him and that she had learned to enjoy more things than just making bombs. Before meeting him, she was a bomb fanatic whose only concern was creating a bomb much more powerful than the previous one and launching it to see what would happen. A foul-mouthed woman. Sarcastic. Someone who complained about everything. Someone who insulted him a lot in his early days. If her family was the family of scarecrows, then she was competing for that position with Kagaya and allies. That's why, and for many other reasons, I didn't understand. I didn't understand it. Why? Why her? Why? Belle stopped what he was doing when he heard Lyra's voice in a whisper, looking up and seeing her staring at him. "What's happening? Why me?" Lyra said those words again, leaving Belle a little confused. Although what he said next made him understand. "Why did you fall in love with me?" Lyra asked without moving from the spot. "I don't understand." Lyra, Belle whispered, surprised by how sudden it all was. "I don't understand it, I'm a crazy woman who likes bombs, I have a foul mouth, I'm not feminine at all, I'm the complete opposite of what a woman would do. I don't understand it." Belle just stared at her in surprise. There are thousands of very beautiful girls in Arario, very feminine, voluptuous. So. Among so many beautiful women in the city, why me? That doubt had been killing the Hobbit ever since Belle confessed. Why her? It wasn't that I had self-esteem issues or anything like that, but I knew very well that I wasn't the best option for a relationship. But that rabbit looked at her differently, as if he saw Lyra completely different from the ones everyone else saw. I just wanted to understand why. Belle did not respond immediately. He stood there, motionless, the damp cloth in his hand, his gaze fixed on her. It wasn't the kind of question one answered lightly, especially not coming from Lyra. For some reason, the silence between them didn't feel awkward, but intense. He put the rag aside, resting his hands on the bar, and walked slowly towards where she was. "Do you want to know why?" he asked gently, without taking his eyes off hers. Lyra swallowed hard, and although she tried to maintain her usual defiant posture, she felt her fingers tighten against the edge of the table. She felt nervous about what she was going to say. "Yes," he murmured. "And I don't want you to say something nice just to be nice, I want you to be sincere." Belle let out a small, barely audible laugh. "Do you think I would do that?" She glanced away for a moment towards the window, as if the cafe window had suddenly become very interesting. "I don't know, just tell me, I want to know before I give you my answer." Belle nodded. He took another step until he was close enough to Lyra. "At first," she began, in a low voice. "I thought you were unbearable." Lyra raised an eyebrow, almost offended. "Thank you, that helps a lot." He smiled. "Wait, I'm not finished. I thought you were unbearable, but at the same time, you were impossible to ignore. You had this way of walking into a room and filling it completely, even if it was with complaints or sarcasm. And that caught my attention." She looked at him, doubtful. "That doesn't explain why you fell in love." "No, of course not," Belle continued, now with a different kind of gleam in her eyes. "I fell in love when I started to see beyond what you showed me. When I noticed that behind all the jokes and insults, there was someone who cared more than they wanted to admit. When I saw you worrying about me in the dungeon, how you put effort into things even while pretending you didn't care, how you smiled when you baked a cake." Lyra lowered her gaze. "That doesn't change the fact that I'm not like the others." Belle took another step, now standing directly in front of her. "Exactly. You're not like the others. And that's what I love most about you." His voice was firm, yet warm. I didn't fall in love with you despite your quirks, Lyra. I fell in love with them. With the way you speak your mind without a care, with your energy, with how you can smile after a bad day. Because when I'm with you, everything feels more alive because when I'm with you I feel happy. She felt a strange warmth rising in her chest. She wanted to look away again, but something about the way he was looking at her prevented her. What if I disappoint you? He whispered. What if I'm not what you expect? Belle smiled gracefully. It was new to see her act like this. I know who you are. And I'm still here. What more could I expect? There was a moment when neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, as if trying to etch that instant into their memory. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, bathing the cafe in a soft gold. Lyra, her heart pounding, thought that maybe this was the moment she had been avoiding and that she no longer wanted to avoid it. She just watched him with her cheeks flushed, seeing how he continued to smile at her. That's why and more I'm in love with you, Lyra. And after those words, the place fell silent. A silence unlike any other. As if she knew that moment was unique. Tonto. Belle let out a laugh upon hearing the hobbit's whisper, though his laughter stopped when he felt a small tap on the lower part of his chest. It was Lyra who had let her forehead fall, the blush on her face clearly noticeable. After those words, it was impossible not to give him an answer. Yes, she whispered. And Belle just raised an eyebrow, confused by those words. Yeah. Yes, I accept to be your girlfriend, you idiot. Belle opened his eyes in surprise upon hearing those words. He felt his heart skip a beat, as if for a moment everything around him had been paused. It was as if Lyra's words had been left floating in the air, bouncing around in his mind again and again to make sure he had heard them correctly. Really? He asked almost in a whisper, as if he feared that any louder noise might break that moment. Lyra did not lift her head, still leaning against him, and her voice was barely audible, but full of something she rarely let show. Don't make me repeat it, I'm embarrassed. Belle felt a smile inevitably spread across his face, but it wasn't the typical joking smile he usually shared with her. It was one of those genuine smiles, filled with relief, happiness, and a touch of surprise. Carefully, he raised a hand and placed it on Lyra's head, gently stroking her hair. You have no idea how happy you make me right now, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She only whispered something unintelligible, but she didn't move away. Instead, she let her forehead remain there, as if that were the only place she wanted to be at that moment. The silence returned, but it was no longer awkward or tense. It was a silence that said everything, a silence that spoke of unspoken promises, of a future that began right there. Finally, Lyra looked up, her eyes still somewhat bright and her cheeks flushed. But let me be clear, this doesn't mean I'm going to stop calling you stupid. Belle laughed, a soft but genuine laugh. As long as I'm your fool, I don't care. She clicked her tongue, but a small, involuntary smile appeared on her lips. The smile disappeared instantly due to great embarrassment as she felt Belle lift her into his bridal embrace. Hey, you idiot. What are you doing? She shouted, embarrassed to be in that position. I always wanted to do this with you, and it's just as I imagined it, she whispered with a loving smile. You say you're not pretty, but to me you're very beautiful. Don't be cheesy and come down. The hobbit tried to complain, but couldn't because Belle silenced her. He silenced her with a kiss on the lips. Lyra's eyes opened suddenly in surprise, and for a moment she remained completely still. The heat of the kiss took her by surprise, not because she had never imagined it, but because it was now really happening. It wasn't an accidental kiss like that day or one on the cheek, it was a real kiss. The protest that was about to escape her lips dissolved the instant she felt the softness and warmth of Belle's hands. Her heart felt like it wanted to burst from her chest, pounding hard, while a wave of emotions coursed through her from head to toe. Belle didn't pressure her, he didn't seek anything beyond that brief, sincere touch. It was a soft kiss, but full of everything he hadn't said in words. When he pulled away, just a few centimeters apart, his forehead rested against hers. I'm sorry, she murmured with a shy smile. I just couldn't wait any longer to do it. Lyra looked at him, her cheeks still burning, her lips slightly parted, and a mixture of surprise and something else in her expression. Cool, she repeated, although this time her voice sounded different, softer, as if that kiss hadn't bothered her. Belle let out a chuckle of amusement at that reaction. Yes, you fool. She wanted to say something, but every time she looked at him so closely, with that genuine smile and that gaze that seemed to see her as if she were the most special thing in the world, the words escaped her. Belle spoke again, in a low voice, as if that moment was too fragile to break with a normal tone. Lyra, thank you for letting me be by your side, I promise I will put up with your explosive personality. She looked away, feigning annoyance, but her grip on Belle's shirt grew a little tighter, as if she really didn't want him to ever let go. But even so, his pride got the better of him. The almonds. No. Belle, I'm warning you, just because I'm your girlfriend now doesn't mean you can carry me around like I'm your doll. And why not? You're earning yourself a kick in the face. While they were arguing, Hestia and Althea were hidden in a certain part of the cafeteria. Hestia with a huge smile, happy with what she was seeing, and Althea with a frown clenching her fists as if she wanted to separate them, although obviously she wouldn't. "It's beautiful, isn't it, Althea?" Hestia asked, looking at the woman. "I don't see how beautiful he is," she whispered with annoyance. "Bellcranel, put me down right now," Lyra insisted. Okay, don't get so worked up," she said, letting out a laugh. "I'm surprised at how easygoing you are." He gently laid her on the ground, without taking his eyes off her. Lyra just frowned in annoyance as her feet touched the ground, crossing her arms. "I'm only going to warn you once," she said, trying to sound serious. "If you're this mushy every day, you're going to tire me out." "I doubt it," he replied with a smile. "In fact, I think you're the one who's going to act all mushy." "Ha! You wish." From inside, Hestia and Althea continued to watch. "Look, even I'm excited," Hestia whispered, her eyes sparkling. "It's like watching a child grow up and find love." "I still see him as a child who's getting into trouble," Althea whispered, though her voice softened somewhat. Perhaps the decision she made wasn't so bad after all. Little by little the sun was setting, darkening the city. Outside, life went on. Inside, in the cafeteria, Belle and Lyra were still arguing, with Belle cracking jokes and the hobbit trying not to embarrass herself. They were no longer two people, but a couple, and the cafe was no longer just a workplace, but a home that Lyra used to hate but now came to appreciate. How would she fare as Belle's partner? She was a complete novice. But when she saw the smile of that fool she had as a boyfriend, she stopped thinking about it and just let life do its thing. Because deep down, she didn't want to think about the future. "I was just thinking. Enjoying the moments with him." End of chapter. Epilogue. 1 year. A year has passed since that day. That day when Lyra decided to explore something new in her life and said yes to Belle. 1 year since they started their romantic relationship. 1 year. Since her whole life changed. Where everything took a complete turn without them noticing. Before, patrolling, making bombs, and playing pranks were her daily priorities. A somewhat immature mind, but one that didn't bother her. Today, a year later, it was different. Patrol. What cake to bake. What topics to talk about with him. What to do to embarrass him. A surprise for him. Or just see him smile and hug him. 1 year. A year in which she learned that life didn't always need to be a whirlwind to feel alive. That sometimes calm could also be exciting, that silence could have its own music, and that routine wasn't boring if you shared it with someone who made you smile for no reason. A year where the days went from predictable to warm. Where small things like a cup of coffee at dawn or the sound of rain hitting the cafe windows became memories to cherish. She learned that loving wasn't about losing her explosive essence, but about sharing it with someone who didn't shy away from the sparks. That being strong didn't always mean fighting, but also allowing yourself to rest in the arms of someone who makes you feel safe. A year where his world grew bigger but also simpler. Where he no longer ran just to throw bombs and destroy things, but to reach a future that now had a name and a face. And although she was still the same Lyra, stubborn, intense, unpredictable, there was something different about her. A new light, a peace I didn't know before, a reason to keep smiling even on gray days. Because a year later, amid laughter, cakes, silly arguments and hugs, Lyra understood something she would never have imagined. Sometimes the best explosions aren't the ones that destroy. But those that transform. Those that, instead of leaving ruins, leave traces. Those that make no noise but change everything around them. And that explosion, the most silent and beautiful of all, was him. Belle. The boy who had come into her life in the most unexpected way, who had endured her temper, her ironies, her little storms, and who without even trying, had managed to break down all her defenses. A year later, Lyra understood that their story did not begin the day they confessed, but much earlier. It began with awkward glances, absurd arguments, those afternoons in the cafeteria where neither of them truly knew their feelings, where they stayed late baking a cake. It began with the noise, the chaos, that spark only the two of them could ignite. And now all that chaos had turned into something beautiful for both of them. The quiet but true love. The bond that grew stronger with every shared laugh, every poorly decorated cake, every little argument that ended with a smile. Her life was still imperfect, full of disasters, flowers scattered all over the kitchen and occasional explosions, some accidental, others not so much. But it was her life. And for the first time, Lyra didn't want to change anything about her. She wanted to keep it just as it was, except for one change. Because in the midst of all that chaos, she had found what she never knew she was looking for. A home. Not a place because he already had his family, this time it was a person. One where she could rest, laugh, be herself without fear of him leaving her because he finds her unbearable. Not even their mother-in-law could separate them. Her life had changed so much in all that time, and she hoped it would continue to change even more, but for the better, by his side. If someone had told her in the past that she would be this in love with someone, she wouldn't have believed it. Life took many turns. Headquarters of the Astria family. It was morning and the girls with their goddess were already having breakfast as usual before starting their day. Ryu and Kagaya competed with each other to see who could eat more elegantly. Ryu filled her plate for the second time with a happy smile. Ryana and Noin were eating while chatting about some topic. Knees, like Asta and Celti, ate in silence, enjoying breakfast. Allies and Iska were excitedly talking about a new type of clothing while they ate. Astria just smiled warmly as she ate, enjoying her daughter's conversations. And finally there was Lyra, who was eating her breakfast in silence, something unusual for her, to be honest. She only took the occasional sip of her coffee while watching her friends with a slight smile. Just look at that. Who would have thought that the little bombshell of the house would be so quiet today? Kagaya commented, raising an eyebrow, unable to resist provoking her. Lyra just took another sip of her coffee without looking up. I don't always have to shout or blow something up, you know. I'm a civilized person too, he replied calmly. That's something new, Allies added with a giggle. Since she got a boyfriend, she's become more docile. Docile? Lyra repeated, slowly lowering the cup and looking at her with a half smile. If you want, I can demonstrate how docile I am with one of my new pumps. Astria couldn't help but let out a slight giggle at that comment. I admit I'm glad to see you so calm lately, the goddess commented, still smiling. Lyra shrugged and looked out the window where sunlight illuminated the city. I guess I've been busy. Busier in love? Noin asked with a mischievous smile, causing the others to stifle their laughter. Don't you start too. Lyra protested, her cheek slightly red. Not everything revolves around Belle. Sure, Asta agreed, his tone clearly indicating he didn't believe him. So why have you had that silly grin on your face since you arrived yesterday? Lyra clicked her tongue but didn't answer. The smile was still there, betraying her. I was just remembering something, okay? The cake. Ryu interrupted softly. No, something better. The kiss. Ryu said without looking up from his plate. The table erupted in laughter, and Lyra slammed her fist on the table with both hands. What on earth is wrong with everyone today? Even that elf is joining in. Astria simply watched with that mixture of tenderness and amusement that only a mother could have. We love you, Lyra, she finally said, calming everyone down a little. And we're happy to see you happy. The words caught her off guard. For a moment, the noise from the dining room faded away. She looked at her family, her sisters in arms, and then at her goddess. He smiled, more gently this time. Thank you really. Something happened, didn't it? Knees asked, knowing that the hobbit wanted to tell them something. I knew her well enough to know what she felt at any given moment. Lyra just stared at Knees in silence, then looked at all of them. After that, she let out a sigh, as if she were preparing to talk about that subject. The truth is that I wanted to tell you all something important, and you too, Astria-sama. The girls stopped laughing and talking when they heard what their classmates said. Their change in voice made it clear to them that it was something important to the hobbit. And what is this important thing you want to tell us? Astria asked curiously. Lyra remained silent, as if carefully considering her words. After all, what she was about to say would be the definitive change for her life. An important stage that was about to be left behind. He couldn't help but remember all those times from the past. When she jumped with her friends across the rooftops patrolling and she threw bombs to catch a criminal while laughing. When I walked alongside one of them, looking for clues about a case they were investigating. When I walked with them all, killing monsters and exploring the dungeon. A stage of her life that she loved very much. Her first stage was in Daedalus, as an orphan, stealing and swindling people to survive. Her second stage as a vigilante girl alongside her family, proudly wearing the felna of her goddess. And now it was time to begin the third stage in her life, a stage she never thought would come, but that she truly loved. Family I. They all remained silent, staring at the hobbit, waiting for her to deliver the news. Yes. Astria said with that sweet smile, as if encouraging her to speak. And finally, after a few seconds, he said it. I would like to give up patrolling and exploring the dungeon so that I can dedicate myself to working full-time in the cafeteria. The dining room fell silent. The silence so heavy that even the sound of cutlery stopped being heard. Lyra swallowed, keeping her gaze steady even though her heart was pounding. It wasn't easy to say. Not after everything she had been through with them. Each of the girls stared at her with expressions of surprise on their faces. After all, what she had just said was no small matter. It wasn't until after a few seconds that Astria broke the silence with a soft voice. Are you sure, Lyra? She asked, without a trace of reproach, only with that maternal calm that always characterized her. Lyra nodded slowly. Yes, I've been thinking about it for a while, she answered honestly. When I started working there, it was just temporary, something I did out of obligation, and then to be near Belle, I admit. But over time I realized I really liked it. She paused, lowering her gaze slightly as she fiddled with the empty cup in her hands, trying to control her nerves, while everyone continued to stare at her. I like baking cakes, seeing people smile when they eat the cakes I've made, feeling that peace. I like feeling that I can create something beautiful without it having to explode every 2 seconds, she added with a small, nostalgic laugh. I know it's not what everyone expects of me, but I want to do it, I want to continue down this path. Astria couldn't help but smile fondly upon hearing those words, and the rest of the girls, after recovering from their surprise, looked at each other for a few seconds and smiled. The explosive hobbit of the family had definitely changed. There was a moment of silence until Kagaya rested an elbow on the table, crossing her arms. So the little terrorist will hang up her bombs to wear an apron and a hat? She asked mockingly, but there was no malice in her eyes, only a hint of affection, which was rare for her. Oh, shut up, Lyra replied, rolling her eyes, though a smile betrayed her. Well, eyes whispered, setting her fork aside. I guess I can't say I'm surprised. Every time we talked, you ended up talking about that place or Belle. What can I say? The hobbit replied, shrugging. I guess I've found something else worth getting up for each day. Heck, I can't believe I said that. Ryu nodded slowly. When the heart finds a purpose, it's natural to follow it, he said in his serene tone. I'm glad to see you so determined, Lyra. Lyra smiled, and this time it was a broad, sincere smile. Thank you, Lion. But wait. Iska interjected, raising a hand. Does that mean you won't be coming with us to the dungeon anymore? It won't be the same without you. I'm not leaving the family completely. When there's an important mission, I can go with you, but I'd like to leave patrols and explorations behind and focus on the cafeteria. The girls smiled again when they heard that. Lyra giving up the opportunity to keep dropping bombs every day to quietly sit in a kitchen baking a cake. It was something they never imagined. Astria watched the hobbit silently for a few more seconds and then stood up. She walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. You've changed so much, Lyra, she said in a warm voice. From the day you arrived with a bomb in your hand and a mischievous smile until now, I'm so proud of you. Just because you found a new path doesn't mean you'll cease to be part of this family. You'll always be my daughter, even if you decide to leave this family for good. Lyra looked up, surprised by those words. So she's not upset? Astria shook her head. Of course not. Every mother wants her daughters to find happiness, no matter where they are. And you finally found it, you found your place in that coffee shop next to that boy. That makes me very happy. For the first time in a long time, Lyra was speechless. She felt a tightness in her chest. For a moment, tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she held them back. I wasn't going to cry in front of them. Thank you, Astria-sama, he said softly, and without thinking twice he stood up to hug her. The girls smiled warmly when they saw that. One of them was going to leave that behind, having found her place, and that made them all happy. Even so, it was surprising that it was Lyra, the one they least expected of all. But with that idiot, you have terrible taste, Kagaya commented with some displeasure. The fact that Belle humiliated you makes me love him even more, said the hobbit with a mocking smile, still hugging her goddess, and a vein popped out on the oriental woman's face. The dining room was filled with laughter after that as Kagaya told them to be quiet. Lyra just watched her friends laugh, those with whom she had shared so much for many years. That was the end of one stage and the beginning of another. And then, unable to stop herself, she smiled again as she looked at each of them. Yes, she whispered to herself. This is the path I want to follow. Perhaps she would no longer be the explosive hobbit who made the streets of Verario tremble. Now, as strange as it sounds, she was the girl who made customers smile with her cakes, who brightened Belle's mornings with her energy, and who had found a new kind of fire within herself. One that did not destroy, but illuminated his life. And so, amid laughter, coffee and promises, Lyra began her new life. One where love, calm and the little things of everyday life would be their new adventure. And so. He loved it. A little while later. The streets of Verario were quiet that morning. The sun was not strong. Its light, instead of being annoying, was warm. The air smelled of freshly baked bread, of everyday life awakening, of that kind of peace that is only felt when the city begins its routine. Lyra walked slowly, her hands in her pockets, letting the breeze gently ruffle her hair. She wore a serene smile, the kind of smile she hadn't shown as often in the past, but which was now an everyday occurrence. What a morning, she whispered to herself, watching a group of children run past her laughing with a makeshift ball. Before, I would have yelled for them to get out of the way, now I just want to smile. Damn, when did I change so much? It was strange to feel like that. Calm, light, she had really changed quite a bit. It was as if all the weight had been lifted with those words she had said at breakfast. I would like to dedicate myself to working full-time in the cafeteria. She remembered the surprised faces of her companions, the laughter, Astria's warm voice, and for a moment she felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and relief. The chapter had closed. A beautiful stage, full of chaos, explosions, patrols, injuries, laughter and jokes. But now another one was beginning. I guess it was about time, wasn't it? He murmured with a small sigh. I can't keep dropping bombs forever. She walked a little further, waving to an elderly woman sweeping the sidewalk. The same old woman who always complained about the noise when she ran past with her equipment, constantly bothering her with her pumps. Now, however, she greeted her with a smile and a "Good morning, Miss Lyra. How curious how life changes." As he walked on, Astria's words kept echoing in his mind. Every mother wants her daughters to find happiness, no matter where they are. Astria saw me, she whispered, lowering her head slightly. Thank you really. She didn't usually say thank you. Needless to say, I felt very much. But today I wanted to do it. There was something liberating about recognizing that I no longer needed to prove anything. Not to be the fastest, nor the strongest, nor the most scandalous. Now she just wanted to be happy and share that happiness with him. Con Bell. Just thinking about his name made her cheeks turn a light red. Ugh, silly, she muttered with a half smile. He's probably baking again without gloves. What would that idiot do without me? I knew him too well. I knew he would be in the cafeteria early preparing the dough for the day's cakes, perhaps so focused that he would forget about the clock. He was like that. Dedicated, clumsy, and sweet. And she couldn't have been happier by that boy's side. As he continued walking, he remembered the first time he set foot in that place. The day of the bomb accident, Althea's murderous glare, the disaster it left in the entire cafeteria. She smiled with a certain tenderness when she remembered it, although at that moment she felt fear. Who would have thought that this disaster would be the beginning of his new life? If you had told me this a year ago, I would have burst out laughing, she chuckled softly, looking up at the sky. But here I am and I don't regret it. She passed a flower stand and stopped for a moment. White flowers always reminded her of Belle. She didn't know why. Perhaps because of her hair or that foolish purity she had when she spoke. Tomorrow I'll buy some to have on the counter in a vase. After those thoughts, she continued walking, humming a nameless melody, one that Belle used to whistle when he was concentrating and that she had memorized. The city continued to awaken, and with each step, Lyra felt more clearly that this was her path. The quiet path. The path she was initially forced to follow but now loved. Unfortunately, there she is, thought the hobbit as she turned a corner and stood facing the place she now called home. Unfortunately, the first thing she saw was her boss and also her mother-in-law, who was leaving the cafeteria. The moment Althea saw Lyra, her brow furrowed. For some reason, the hobbit felt that she was never accepted by that woman, even though a year had passed. Even as revenge for him giving her a dirty look, she would always kiss Belle lovingly whenever he passed by them, which made the woman angry, but she didn't intervene. Hello, your boss, Lyra said, about to say the forbidden word. Althea just narrowed her eyes, looking at the hobbit with annoyance. I thought your shift started in the afternoon, said the woman, surprised by the early appearance of that annoying being. Not anymore, I've given up patrols and explorations to work full-time here. Those words made Althea open her eyes in surprise, then whisper a few words in frustration. Oh shit. Lyra couldn't help but smile with amusement at that. She knew it would annoy Althea to have her there all day. Are you going somewhere? I asked innocently, which only annoyed Althea more. That's none of your business. But that said, Althea turned around and started walking, having no intention of talking anymore with that annoying dwarf. Except that your son loves me. What did you say? Althea asked irritably when she heard the hobbit whisper something. Nothing. I hope it goes well for you. Althea just clicked her tongue and continued on her way, making Lyra smile amusedly. It would be very difficult, but one day she would manage to make that woman accept her relationship with Belle. Even if it was the last thing she did, perhaps Hestia could help her. No, she expected too much from that goddess, although she had to admit that it was thanks to her that some things were resolved. Well, let's go in and see what that idiot is doing, he thought, walking towards the cafeteria and opening the door. Upon entering the cafeteria, the first thing that reached her was the aroma of freshly baked bread and the aroma of coffee, a smell that she quite enjoyed, to be honest. And to think that at first I hated this place, he thought with some amusement. After that, she began to look around for that rabbit that irritated her quite a bit at times, but no matter how much it bothered her, she never moved away from it. Damn, she should be the best girlfriend in the world because she was very tolerant. Any other girl in his shoes would walk away from him because of some joke, but not her. Partly because they were alike in that respect, jokers, in short, they complemented each other very well. Besides, when he wasn't making jokes, he acted like the sweetest boyfriend, something that always embarrassed her quite a bit, which she couldn't help. And thinking about the rabbit. There he was. Bellcranel. Sitting at one of the tables with his arms crossed and his head resting on them, he was completely asleep. The apron still hung crookedly from her waist, and her slightly disheveled white hair moved gently with each breath. It seemed she had decided to take a short break before opening the cafe, since she didn't appear until the afternoon, no one would think she would show up for work in the morning. If I had known, I probably would have been anxiously waiting for her, but since she decided to keep the patrol departure a secret, that wasn't the case. And it was better that way. There were few times when I could see him so vulnerable, just peacefully asleep. Lyra stopped at the entrance, watching him for a few seconds. And without being able to stop it, a smile appeared on her face. It happened every time she looked at him. A smile would simply form every time their eyes met. Her past self would be throwing up seeing how she was acting like a total love-struck girl. "You're a fool," she murmured softly, her tone no longer filled with annoyance, only affection and grace. He approached with light steps, trying not to make a sound. He took one of the high stools that were next to the counter and slowly dragged it to his side. He climbed up and sat down, standing at her level with his face just a few centimeters from hers. For a few moments he just stared at him intently. He looked at her calm eyelashes, the way she breathed, the slight movement of her shoulder with each exhalation. His white skin, his white hair, that pretty little boy face that wouldn't hurt a fly. He simply observed it. Who would have thought that this boy, she whispered with a melancholic smile, would change my life like this? "Hey Laura. I'm Lyra, you damn idiot." She hated him, just as she hated him when she first met him. She was disgusted by his face, knowing he was going to say something stupid or change her name. And now I couldn't stop looking at that face. Haha, I chuckled softly as I remembered those times. She never thought she would feel so at peace. She never imagined she would find a place where her heart could rest. But he made it possible. Lyra rested an elbow on the table and tilted her head slightly, observing him silently, with that gentle expression she only showed to him and no one else, not even her family. And to think that a year ago I didn't even know how to say what I felt, she whispered almost to herself. But now I don't need to say it. Her eyes twinkled slightly as she leaned forward a little further. Gently, she placed a soft kiss on his cheek without waking him. The contact was brief, tender, full of everything that didn't need to be expressed in words. Then he stayed there, his forehead just inches from Belle's, watching as Belle continued to sleep, oblivious to the gesture. Lyra smiled and playfully began to trace circles with a finger on her cheek, stretching it slightly as she laughed. "Rest, you fool," he muttered. "From now on you'll have to put up with me all day in the cafeteria, although I think that will make you happy, it will make you as happy as it makes me." The silence of the cafe was filled with the warmth of the sun that came through the window, bathing them both in a calm golden light. It was time to open the cafeteria, but I would give that silly boy another half hour to sleep before working. Lyra. Cranel sounds good as a last name, she thought, letting out a laugh and continuing to pinch her cheeks. And so, amidst the aroma of bread and the distant murmur of the city, Lyra continued to gaze tenderly at the boy who changed her world. And I would continue to change it more and more from now on. And let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.